Ugly baby syndrome. How parents really feel about their unattractive children. My daughter was born with this ridiculous nose, and I gasped in the delivery room. It was so bad. I noticed it immediately. It looked like a frickin' beak. This baby was only 5 pounds. That is so much nose for 5 pounds. My husband posted a picture on Facebook and I almost died. I begged him to take it down. Luckily, it turned out it was really swollen from pushing against my insides during my 26-hour labor, and it is so much better now. Well, I didn't notice so much when he was a child, but as he grew older, his nose got really big and I could see overall how ugly he was. I didn't feel bad or anything. He's great at sports and stands out on soccer. He has this group of friends, so he never really has had any social problems or inferiority feelings. He told us he'd been bullied at school, but he seems to handle it really well. He ignores anyone who bullies him, or doesn't respond when someone calls him by a nickname. When someone tries to be aggressive, he just tells an authority figure about it. He's handled it really well and I'm proud of him. He'll probably do great. Athletic guys who are that confident have no trouble getting their fair share. A 6-year-old son has always been the spitting image of me, and I'm not a physically attractive man. He's already very bright though, so I'll know he'll find ways to work around that problem, like I did. I think my son is a good-looking boy now. He certainly gets a lot of compliments, but my god, he was an ugly baby. He sort of looked like a cross between a monkey and a frog. I'm not lying. He had a hairy forehead until he was about 6 months old, and then bam! Suddenly he became cute. The older he got, the better looking he's become. Even when he looked like a monkey frog, I loved the heck out of him and I thought he was the cutest thing ever. I think 95% of newborns are ugly. I naturally thought my daughter was the most beautiful creature on the planet. Thank God, we got a cute one. 6 months later, looking back on newborn pictures, I was horrified that I posted some of them on social media. I still cringe when I see them 3 years later. What an odd creature. Looked like a tiny, grumpy Churchill, which was in fact her nickname until she was about 9 months old. She's 3 now and insanely adorable. I know this because everyone who was honest about what an ugly baby she was agrees with me now. Wait, so people were straight up telling you she was a wrinkled meatbag from day one? We all think that about other people's newborns, but nobody's actually saying it. Come on, people! My now adult son isn't great looking, but he's fantastic fun and I'm so proud of him. His girlfriends freely admit that he laughs them into the bedroom. When my first daughter was born, she was the single most beautiful child that's ever blessed the planet. After my second son was born, my husband and I pulled out newborn photos of the first to look for similarities. There were none. With the benefit of hindsight, we were shocked at how weird my daughter had looked. I mean, now she's the most beautiful toddler that's ever blessed the planet, so I guess we're due for another rude awakening in about 2 years. From a slightly different perspective, I'm nowhere near as attractive as my older sister. We're so dissimilar looking and she's objectively prettier than I am. People used to ask me if I was adopted all the time. And by all the time, I mean literally every time someone found out we were sisters, I'd be asked that question. My mum always swore we were both beautiful, but when her nickname for my sister was the Beauty Queen, and mine was the Butterbean, I kinda figured it out on my own. Oh my god. My brother and I look nothing alike as well. People straight up don't believe we're related when they see us. I mean, I also don't look anything like either of my parents, so maybe I am adopted. My son was absolutely adorable until he hit puberty. Puberty made him gangly and scrawny, which, coupled with his wavy red hair and poor eyesight, made for a rather geeky-looking kid. Now he's almost 17 and he's grown into his body more. He's acquired a better sense of style and personality, and he's shaping into a handsome young man. He's come full circle. When my second daughter was born, my mum looked at her and said, "Now there's a face only a mother could love." I was heartbroken because I thought she was beautiful. My first son was born with hairy ears and a weird-looking bridge of his nose. One of my first thoughts about him was that nose had better straighten out. His ears stopped being fuzzy when he was a month old or so, but the bridge of his nose is just a little off still. Still, somehow he's 5 and gorgeous. My youngest son, God forgive me, was not overly cute. He was angry as all heck, jaundiced and had splotchy skin, and we barely saw his eyes for nearly a month. And he got uglier. Tiny eyes, far too close together, somehow even more angry, not jaundiced, but red and splotchy with an incredible talent for arranging his features in the least flattering possible way. Suddenly, at 6 months, he metamorphosed into a gorgeous, big-eyed baby. Still grumpy looking, but at least cute. I'm kind of paranoid that they'll both turn unfortunate looking again. It was very challenging having loving feelings for a screaming ball of rage that was so disappointing looking for a while there. My friend has one beautiful child and one ugly child, and she told me at birth she thought her kid looked like Benjamin Button, and she kept waiting for him to grow out of it. He never did, she's always known. I know a very attractive couple who have 2 children, both in their late 20s now, who are some of the ugliest motherfrickers I've ever seen in my life. How the frick does that happen? Sometimes really attractive people are attractive because certain features are exaggerated or put together in a novel way. Stick 2 of those things together and you might get something amazing, but also you might get a weird collection of features that just don't sit right together. My granny would say the opposite. How can 2 ugly parents make such a gorgeous child? A woman I know had a baby about 10 months ago. The poor child looks like an egg. She has a big bald oval head and little features. I'm sure she'll grow into herself eventually. There was a girl I went to grade school with and she was not ugly, but not memorable either. She was teased a bit, being called a boy and stuff. Well, she got the last laugh because she grew up and became a stunningly attractive woman. Best part is, she's smart and has always had self-confidence. I saw her and really didn't recognize her at first, but we caught up and chatted when we ran into each other. I know this doesn't fit, but my daughter is beautiful. Has been since day one. She's 10, but tall and thin, and looks much older than her age. But my God, is she dumb. Some things are worse than being ugly. My child isn't ugly, but I'll always remember the relief of finding out he wasn't. To start with, he was 2 weeks overdue and my wife had to be induced. After 20 hours of labor, the consultant said his heart rate was fluctuating and we'd need an emergency C-section. After the procedure, a nurse called me in and told me not to look at the floor, just at my wife. I looked at my wife's face, surrounded by blue blankets, and then the floor. It looked like the finale of Jaws. When I finally saw my son for the first time, I cried like never before. Some of the nurses watched me as I picked him up and told him through the tears, "I'm so glad you're not ugly." One of the nurses gasped and said she'd never heard a new father say that to a newborn. Maybe not, but they've all thought it, I can tell you. My daughter was not a cute baby. She just wasn't. I love her so much, and I loved her despite her being less than attractive as an infant. I didn't feel disappointed or embarrassed or anything, it was just a fact. She's 7 now, and she's getting really pretty. She just had to grow into it. Her dad and I are both tall, and I think she'll be close to 6 foot based on her growth charts. She could model if puberty doesn't screw her over too bad. The worst is people showing you photos of their ugly offspring and you having to lie and say that the mutant in the photo is, oh, so cute. My trick is to say, he looks just like you, and watch their eye twitch as they realize what that means. Twins. The boy was frickin' adorable since day one, and the girl, not so much. She didn't really grow hair until age 3. Now at age 6, the tides are turning. The boy is taking after me. I was also a good-looking kid, but it didn't last, and also has a pretty annoying personality. The girl is looking pretty average now, but she has a great personality, and everyone loves her. When the nurses showed me my newborn child after a C-section, and still one on some pain meds, obviously, I said hesitantly, "Are you sure that's my baby?" He looked like a little rat with jet black hair and dark, almost black eyes. I just couldn't believe it. He's since grown into his looks, and his eye color and hair color have changed. He's very cute now. You know, it might have been naive to come here expecting people to just be volunteering the fact that they thought their kids were pug ugly. We're of course getting a lot of answers tempered by statements of, "Oh, but I love them anyway," or "but they grew into it." I'll be very interested to see if anyone outright says their kid is monstrous. I mean, I'll be heartbroken too, but it'll at least be a unique answer. Okay, my daughter wasn't a cute baby. I'm a mum here, but I'm also pretty objective about my kids. Realistic about what they are and what they aren't, though I'll love them no matter what. In fairness, I don't think most newborns are cute, especially white babies. They all seem red and squished for a long time. She was really cute from like 6 months to 5 to 6 years. After that, she went through a real homely streak. Chubby, kind of an androgynous face, and her cutting the F out of her beautiful hair didn't help things. Then she became really beautiful at like 14 to 15. That was her downfall. She started living in the beautiful bubble, where everyone gave her everything she wanted for free, including booze and substances, and it led to a very serious problem that nearly ruined her life. If she'd have stayed unattractive, she probably wouldn't have developed the serious problems that she did. She's 23 and still just wants to party. She hasn't held a job in several years. She's still beautiful, just a beautiful disappointment. It's weird because her little brother looks exactly like her, though his homely period was just a few bad haircuts when he was in a gawky stage. He looks like a model and acts like an angel. He's been a gift. I've been trying to save my daughter's life with her addiction for years. I've went without things for myself, and I've sacrificed for her problem even after she was well into adulthood. She doesn't appreciate it one bit. That I was paying for her to live right down to buying her tampons, and she'd always call me a fat, ugly B-word. Well, I wasn't always a fat, ugly B-word. After months of her nasty talk, after she'd literally punched me in the face while I was driving 70 miles per hour down a highway, calling me a fat B-word the whole time, heaven help me, but I told her, so what? I'm a fat, ugly B-word now? Well, I was a much cuter child than you were, so there. That shut her up for a minute. Though less than a few weeks later, she was calling me a fat, ugly B-word again, so I guess it didn't do any good in the long term. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My one grandniece was born with a large, weird head. It isn't related to any problems, it's just big and lumpy. The first time my mother and I saw her, she was at a family gathering with my sister, the grandma, in attendance. Mum, sister, and I ended up together alone in a room, and we all looked at each other, guiltily waiting to see who'd say it. I think it was my sister. We all giggled and then told each other she'll probably grow out of it. She hasn't. She actually has a pretty face and is a smart, sweet, athletic girl, but the head. Of course, she has thin, light color hair, so you can see it easily too. I secretly thought my older daughter was an ugly baby for the first year and a half or so of her life. I was a bit disappointed and occasionally wondered if people who said she was cute were lying to me to make me feel better. She ended up growing into an adorable toddler. Then I thought she was a bit ugly again when she reached 4 to 5, and her hair was very long, nearly to her butt. It made her face look kind of fat, despite that she's always been very thin, and the long hair I guess was weighing too much and looking drab. She decided to cut her hair to chin length, and after that she was extremely pretty. It was really amazing what a difference a new haircut made. The difference in the before and after pictures of her haircut are pretty telling. I didn't think my son was cute when he was born. I had bad postpartum depression and I cried often because of it. I cried anytime someone told me he was cute because I just thought they were lying. He grew into a very cute toddler and is now an awkward-looking 7-year-old who's attractive when his hair is cut a very specific way and is otherwise awkward-looking. I've also got a 7-year-old in the same situation. His big ears, round head, and double cowlicks, think alfalfas, require a tight on the sides, very specific length on top kind of haircut. With that and his thick plastic glasses, he's handsome, albeit a bit gangly. My youngest, though, is amazingly adorable. Like a frickin' angel child. They look unrelated. Don't tell them. I really believe that most parents will never know if their child's ugly. I think every parent truly believes their kids are the most beautiful things in the world. As a mother of 4, I sometimes wonder if my children are ugly, and I just don't see it. Because I've known people with some pretty ugly kids that are always posting pics with comments like, "your daily dose of cuteness," or "isn't he lovely?" Now that my kids are older, and I know they're gorgeous, I found myself looking back at some not-so-attractive baby moments. But I never thought so until looking at them years later. Parents in denial. When will you realize your child is ugly? How will you feel about it? Yeah, these answers have made me so scared to have kids. My sister was an extremely ugly baby and my parents knew it. She didn't have a single piece of hair on her head until well past the age of 2, massive ears and a nose like a beak. My mother was so ashamed she never took her hat off. She's 18 now and she still has a pretty terrible nose, but she's learned to combat it with a contour palette. Full disclosure, I'm not a parent, but I was a hideously unattractive child. I was born without a chin. Apparently I sucked my thumb so much in the womb that I wore it away completely. My dad claims, and my usually less silly mother confirms, that when I first came out, his first words were, "Holy crap. Is he always going to look like that?" I have a chin now, but I still looked like Beaker until about the age of 4. Oh, I was there at the moment another mother figured it out, and it was so embarrassing. I was at my girlfriend's parents' house having dinner when her mum's wine circle came over for their nightly patio drinking on the back porch. At some point after dinner, my girlfriend and I went out to have a glass of wine with them and chill. Now, my girlfriend had a younger sister who was in high school, and all of the mothers there had daughters of a similar age. Anyways, one of the mothers very straight-facedly asked my girlfriend if she'd heard of a butterface and what it meant. My girlfriend starts laughing and cracking up and goes into a long winding joke about what a butterface is, and what it means, laughing the whole time. At the end of her explanation, the whole group of mothers are sitting there quietly, absolutely mortified at what my girlfriend is gleefully rattling off. After a very confused minute, the mother who asked about it simply said she'd just found out that day that was her daughter's new nickname at school. Ouch. Oh no. Oh no. I mean, at least this still points to our conclusion that most parents are happily delusional about their kid's perceived cuteness, right? And the kid is in high school, going through puberty. Generally, things can only get better from that point. Also, fun fact, this list of submissions has the most deleted answers that I've ever seen. People felt bad about writing in, and they took their answers down in breathtaking quantities later. Like I'm scanning through entire screens full of deleted answers to find the remaining ones. I was a cute child, but puberty was not kind to me. From 12 through 18, I was fat, not ugly, but definitely not good looking. My mum would often say to me, "My daughter's a good person, and even people uglier than you have boyfriends, so I don't think you should have a problem." Luckily, I've lost weight, got braces, my skin cleared, but I'm glad she always emphasized on inner beauty. I was an adorable baby and cute toddler. Once I hit 5 years old, everything went downhill for several years until I turned 12 and puberty kicked in. I was incredibly skinny and dorky looking, with huge glasses, unruly hair, and really crooked teeth. Puberty helped me fill out, my contacts and braces got into play, and so did my hair gel. As I got older, I got, quote, better looking. Lord only knows how I'll look in another decade or so, but I'm glad my 7-year awkward phase ended when it did. "Oh listen honey, we knew when you were 2, it just got worse from there. We're thrilled you grew up and could post on the internet, but let's face it, you aren't going to be in an Abercrombie ad anytime soon. Stay strong though." My best friend growing up was one of those unfortunate, at least in our society, souls. She was short, about 5'1", and very obese for a kid. In grade 5, she was probably pushing around 200 pounds and wore a 42-inch waist men's jeans. She had a jutting brow ridge, a blade-like nose, and horrible teeth. She was so buck-toothed, they met in an almost right angle in the center of her mouth, kind of like a cowcatcher on the front of trains. In order to fix her teeth, they'd have to break her jaw in a bunch of places. She couldn't chew with her mouth closed, so it was awful listening to her eat, especially chips. She hated her teeth so much that she never cared for them, and they basically rotted out of her mouth. She had very fine, very curly hair that was so thin you could see her scalp, and even though she was a bigger girl, she had small, pointy mammary glands. Everyone called her Roseanne, but Roseanne was prettier. It was terrible. Her parents spoiled her and bought her whatever she wanted, maybe in part because they felt guilty. Because her teeth were so bad, about 3 or 4 years ago she had to have them all taken out and got dentures. They completely changed the shape of her face. When you have bad teeth, it seems counterintuitive, but it hurts less to eat soft, sugary stuff than it does to eat healthy food. She lost a ton of weight because it no longer hurt to eat healthy, and she was no longer afraid to smile. She looks like a completely different person now. Of course, she was always beautiful on the inside, but now she feels that way too. It's kind of a crappy moral to this story. You know, she was ugly her whole life, but now she's beautiful. But now she's happy and that's all that matters. She has 2 great kids, work that she loves, tons of family and friends who adore her, and these were all things she had before she became pretty. The best thing about the most beautiful child on earth is that every mother gives birth to it. Kids are all ugly at one point in growing up or another. Usually they grow into it, or at least out of the weird features. You know, ears too big for the head, smushed up beak nose. Usually it kind of evens out over time and most kids look fairly decent. As parents, the best thing we can do is encourage hairstyles that fit the facial shape and complement existing structures. We teach them how to dress for what styles of clothing look good on them, and teach them good personal grooming habits to maximize all the natural traits they have that are good. I'm lucky. I bred with someone with a significantly different regional racial makeup than I had, so rather than amplifying my strong traits, the kids ended up having a lot of mine and hers in toned-down versions that look better than me or her. And we're far from ugly to begin with. I'll be interested in seeing how they look as adults. So far, so good. I was an ugly baby and there was no getting around it, my mother said. I came out breech birth and the doctor grabbed me by the eyes to haul my head out. Cue 2 black eyes that crossed and a beat-up face for the first few weeks of my pitiful existence. After that, she says I straightened out and looked more towards normal, but she said even my other doctors, I was sick and homely, couldn't find nice things to say about my looks. She's like 3 now, and it's like, well, I'll love them no matter what. My son was cute when he was born, but my daughter, good God, she was born covered in black hair and had a wine stain over her eye, and her face was horribly swollen. She looked like Don Rickles. It was just awful. Thankfully, she's adorable now. Sometimes you just have to wait it out. I was the ugly child and relentlessly bullied because of it. I'm the swan now. Braces, a developed chest, and a decent haircut work wonders. For any parents out there wondering about their ugly kids' futures, I was frickin' hideous between the ages of about 7 and 16. But then I sort of grew into my features. I learned how to style myself, do my makeup to suit me. I still have a very prominent nose, but it hasn't stopped me from getting boyfriends or fun bedroom times. What's the best loophole that you've ever found? I coach a high school team. We recently bought airfare with Spirit Airlines to take 9 students to a competition. 2 of the students cancelled about a month out from the trip, and we had to replace them with 2 different students. Spirit Airlines policy, no name changes. Can't even pay a fee to change the name. The tickets are basically lost. I have to buy new tickets. Spirit's customer service is overseas, and they plainly don't care at all about customer service because they don't actually work for Spirit, etc., etc. Except that Spirit Airlines does allow passengers to correct misspellings, and these folks don't really recognize nonsense names. So over 4 calls, I changed the names of the cancelled students to the names of the new students, 2 letters at a time. No one at Spirit customer service made a note because who would care? And no one ever notices that the correct names during the intermediate steps were nonsense. Also, F Spirit Airlines. Some new magazine was asking college students to send out subscription forms by email to all their friends. For each 25 emails you sent, you'd get a $10 Amazon gift card. Turns out they didn't need to be real emails. I made about $100 before they told me to stop. At my university, there was a command which you could use on their Unix systems to get a list of all the email addresses in the university, which is why I guess my university email was always spammed. I wasn't hacking, they just didn't set up user permissions properly. My justification as to why it's not hacking is that we had authorization to log into the system with our own user accounts, and the command we used is a thoroughly documented, supported operating system command used with its intended purpose. We also did tell the admins because we were sick of our email being spammed too. There's really no difference between performing whatever command it was, I forget now, and is, cd, touch, ifconfig and so on and so forth. Bonus shady loophole though, on my CS assignments the professors would use the Unix timestamps as submission times, and if I noticed I made a mistake on my homework, I could set the timestamp on my homework assignments using the touch command. In first grade, our school had Catch a Kid cards. Every time you did something good, you'd get one. Whoever had the most at the end of the year won a prize. My teacher, to promote animal awareness or some crap, gave us 1 card for each newspaper story we brought in that had something to do with animals. So instead of being a good kid and doing good deeds, I just combed through the newspaper each day and hoarded cards through animal stories. Eventually she was like, "Alright, for frick's sake, you're only getting half a card for each story." And I was like, "Miss Fives, I do not give a frick," and continued bringing in the stories. I destroyed all the competition and won the grand prize of a $50 Toys R Us gift card, which, when converted from 6-year-old dollars into US dollars, is about $24,500. Yes, that sounds like something the young narrator would have done as well. I think $50 when I was a kid would have purchased enough cheap plastic knickknacks to fill an entire closet and make all of my friends jealous. Best Buy had double trade-in value on games several times. Craigslist people want cash instead of store credit, but used games for $20 get $25 in trade-in, which doubles to our $50 store credit. I ended up with about $1,200 in store credit, which cost me maybe $400. My old bank used to give me $2 reimbursement any time I used another bank's ATM to cover the fee. There was a local bank ATM that charged a $1.50 fee, so I would make 50 cents 3 times a month. I assume they had a max on this, or I'd just sit at the ATM all day. Assuming 30 seconds per transaction, you're making $60 an hour running the ATM. I could only do it 3 times per month. So what are you doing now that you have all that extra scratch? How many islands do you own? Years ago, I signed up for the Columbia House DVD of the month when I was 16. Most of you probably don't know about this, but it was a deal where you get a dozen DVDs for free and then had to buy one a month for $15. If you didn't order a movie that month, they would send you one that was their selection of the month. Anyway, when I got all the free movies, I wrote them a letter stating I wasn't 18 and they cancelled my subscription and let me keep the movies for free. Also, back then you could just sign up with a fake name. It was a simpler time. I would sign up for those CD clubs and get the initial shipment with the commitment to buy more and an auto-shipped selection of the month. You could return a form to refuse the selection, or they would send it to you automatically. Inside the auto-ship package would be a couple of coupons for 2 more free CDs. I'd get the auto-ship package, open it, take the coupons, and then glue the package closed and mark it Return to Sender. Ended up scoring a couple dozen more free CDs that way before they stopped auto-shipping me the monthly selection. Back when I was much younger, maybe around 8 or 9, my stepfather, notorious spicy food connoisseur, dared me to eat a chili pepper. After I refused, he told me that if I could eat the whole thing, he'd buy me an Xbox. He hadn't said anything about chewing, so I cut the pepper into 3 and swallowed them whole with some milk. Always to keep his word, he bought me an Xbox the following day. My stepdad doesn't play video games and has admitted he wouldn't think to do it, which is why he made that deal in the first place. I work at McDonald's. The first thing that comes to mind is the one time when a guy ordered a 50-cent cone in a cup and Oreo crumbs on the side. He mixed it together right there at the counter and made a cheap version of a McFlurry, which is $2.50. I'll throw in another story for good measure. A lady wanted a McChicken meal, McChicken sandwich, medium fries, medium drink, but wanted all the contents ordered separately. On the screen there's a meal button that groups everything together. Ordering everything separately made it like $1 cheaper. If you do your own brake job, you can buy brakes from AutoZone that include a warranty. This warranty just so happens to cover normal wear and tear. Every time you need new brakes, bring in the worn-out ones and you get a new set for free. Seriously amazing. When Verizon changed their unlimited plan, we got to keep ours due to being grandfathered in. Basically, as long as we kept our phones, we kept the plan. But once we upgraded, we would have to switch plans. My family has 4 phones, 3 smartphones and my little brother's dumb phone with no data. After we went to upgrade, we asked the Verizon rep if there was a way we could keep unlimited. After some experimenting with the system, we found a way. She moved my data package to my brother's phone since he didn't have any data, upgraded my phone, then moved the data package back. Same for my parents' phones. So we got to keep the unlimited and we still got our upgrade. Screw you Verizon, but major props to your employees. I also have Verizon. However, I think they blocked this loophole. However, you can get new old phones or used ones and swap out the SIM card. I've done this twice. I earn double points on my credit card through gas and grocery purchases. So when I plan to buy something, say at Lowe's or go out to eat, I go to the grocery store and buy a gift card. Double points for the gift card and at least double fuel points through the grocery store. There was a McDonald's near my college and in it was an ATM. If you used the ATM and got a receipt, it would come with a coupon for a buy one, get one free large sandwich. I'd swipe my card, hit cancel, and a receipt would print out showing the cancellation. I would then find someone in line buying a large sandwich and hand it over to them. Free sandwiches for about 8 months until it finally went away. I don't eat at McDonald's anymore. Watched a guy do this over the course of about 1.5 years when I worked for a credit card company. The guy was getting a divorce but wanted to hide some of the money from his soon-to-be ex-wife. So he overpaid his credit card by $80,000. He then called us to issue a check for the money, so on his statements it would reflect a zero balance. But he would never cash the check, so it would come back on our books. Every 6 months, the balance would return and he would call to have a new check issued so it looked like an accounting error. From what I understood, the lawyer only reviewed a couple of months' worth of credit card statements, and he timed the issuance of the check just right so no one was the wiser. He called and spoke to a guy on my team and told him the whole story, and then we issued the check for the last time and never heard from him again. I used to work as a teller for a credit union. Guy would do the same thing. We would cut cashier checks out to a neutral account, so he just took all of his money as cashier checks payable to himself. Came in on the 6 months mark to recut the checks. Hid so much money from his wife. When I first got an iPhone, I brought an insurance package that I thought covered just about anything. After about a month of having my new iPhone, I got a really bad scratch on the screen. The scratch haunted me and would constantly imagine a nice fresh screen again, so I went to the insurance company and asked them to replace it. The insurance rep told me my coverage is limited to more severe damage like cracks and water damage, not scratches. So naturally, I went into the parking lot and tanked my phone against the pavement, completely obliterating the screen. I walked back into the same insurance rep, acted like I wasn't there 5 minutes ago, and explained that my phone was severely damaged and I wanted a replacement. In 4 days, I had a nice smooth iPhone free of charge, this time with a screen protector. Not my find, but my mother's. Back in the day, when a woman needed her husband's permission to get a loan or sign up for a credit card, my mother used to take advantage of the "sign up for our store credit today and get X gift for free." She would fill out the form completely, but since my father refused to sign the permission section because he thought it was stupid that she would need permission from her husband in the first place, the credit card company would throw out her application, so she would get the free gift either way. She must have done this a dozen or more times. Yes, game the patriarchy, madam. Game it for all it's worth. Oh, and the credit card companies as well, I suppose. Double win. Not my loophole, but whatever. The American government wanted, and still wants, people to use $1 coins instead of notes, so they started selling $1 coins for $1. People used their credit cards to buy $100,000 worth of coins and then immediately deposited them all into their bank, taking them out of circulation again, to pay off their credit card and then reap the rewards from the credit card usage, usually in the realms of frequent flyer miles. People were accumulating millions of dollars worth of airline travel for free. You're forgetting an important part of the loophole: free shipping. In order to encourage wider distribution of the coins, the US Mint offered free shipping on orders of coins. So basically, order coins from the US Mint with a rewards credit card, then have them shipped for free to you, then take them to the bank immediately upon receiving them. No cost to you, and you rack up the points. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, I have a good one. I'd saved up a crap load of coins and I needed to get them counted. I went to a bank that I knew had a coin counter, mine didn't, and asked the staff if I could use it if I belonged to another bank. She said sure, so I did. It was about $800+ when all was counted. I took my slip to the counter and she asked if I had an account with them. I explained I didn't, but the lady at the front said I could use it. She comes over, B-word, and says she didn't realize I didn't have an account here. What the frick? I would need to pay 20% of all my coins total. I was fuming for about 5 seconds, then I turned to the teller and said, "I'd like to open an account, please." She was teed off, but she sent me to the other section to open an account. I deposited the money into my account, waited until I got my card, withdrew it, and went in and closed the account. It was a lengthy workaround, but it worked. 20%? Oh my god, I would have done that too. What a load of crap. Always wanted to tell people about this or write into Nintendo Power, and I never had the chance. This goes back to the days of Game Boy. I learned one day while playing Final Fantasy Adventure that you could max out your levels through a simple trick. 1. When one of your characters would gain a new level, do not move from your existing position and immediately save the game. 2. Then press B, A, Start, Select, which would cause the Game Boy to reset. 3. Load up the game where you saved and you will immediately get attacked by the same monster that you leveled up from last time. Upon killing him, the same character who got leveled up previously will level up again. Rinse, repeat. It's old and no one cares, but I feel like I finally got to spread the word on this one, and I can die happy. Winn-Dixie had Skittles buy one get one free. At the register, when you scanned a pack of sour Skittles, a manufacturer's coupon for a free bag of Skittles would come out of the register. So as long as they were separate transactions, you could use the cup from the previous transaction on the current one, so on and so forth. I bought a whole case of both, paying 12 cents for tax for each transaction. Most hotels will charge you if you cancel a booking within 48 hours of your scheduled stay. You can reschedule your booking for free though and move it outside of the 48-hour block and then cancel for free. This year, I have casually found a vending machine near my house that has a little bug. If I insert my money and repeatedly press the button for a Fanta, the machine gives me 2 Fanta instead of 1. Now I always go for that vending machine. It wasn't a loophole, but once at the airport I wanted some soda at the vending machine. I inserted the money and I didn't get 1 soda, I got 4. Like seriously, I was literally screaming to my friends, "I got 4 of these!" In the airport, I never won any lottery or whatever. Vending machines often don't want to give me the food I just bought. But that day, I was victorious. I'd beaten the machine. And now I have the image in my head of you chugging all of them next to an impatient TSA agent because he wouldn't let you bring them on the plane. My high school advanced algebra teacher had a system where you could retake an exam if you failed. Part of this was if you were to tutor someone who failed, and then subsequently passed because of your help, you'd get half of their improvement added to your score. So the smartest girl in the class and I took turns getting zeros on exams and then tutoring each other. When I was in elementary school, I took part in a paper airplane contest in which whoever's paper airplane flew the furthest won. We had unlimited pieces of paper at our disposal and about 10 minutes to craft our planes. I noticed some other kids had airplanes that flew quite a bit further than mine, but still not very far, so I basically crunched all of my failed planes into a dense paper ball and just chucked it. It went almost 4 times as far as my nearest competitor. We had the same project for a public administration class in college. The project was more about the other stuff that went along with it than the competition, but you got a big boost for winning it. There was no restriction on what materials could be used, just on the cost of the plane. We just wrapped paper around a baseball and had the college's starting pitcher, who was on our team, toss it. We got the credit, but so did second place, and my friend who took the class the following year said they had a lot more restrictions on their project. When our whole Algebra 2 class figured out how grading on a curve works and statistically used it to our advantage, average grade in our finals was a 52%, so the whole class passed without really even trying on it. Went to Walmart to buy a shotgun which required proof of residency, and my driver's license had a P.O. box, so they wouldn't accept it. I asked what documents could be used as a proof of residency. Turns out a fishing license counts. Does Walmart sell fishing licenses at the same sporting goods desk? Yes, they do. Document needed to get a fishing license? A driver's license. A Walmart sporting goods associate filled out the paperwork for my fishing license, for which I provided my physical address and then handed it over to me. I handed it back and said, "Now, I'd like to purchase that shotgun." The look on their face was priceless, but a few minutes later, I walked out with it. Got a similar FU story from Disney World. We were at Epcot and it had been pouring rain all day. Mostly we'd just been hanging out under a pavilion. Finally, we decided to head back when it slacked up, but being Florida, it started pouring again. Ducked into the Mexican restaurant there to wait it out and get dinner. Asked the hostess for a table for 3. "I'm sorry, we're on reservations only tonight." "Okay, fine." I pulled out my phone and checked their website. Sure enough, they had a reservation open for that time. Quickly made the reservation, looked at the hostess and said, "Yes, reservation for 3, name of Sparkstalker." She just glared at me while I smiled like an idiot. My dad went to Walmart with my little brother to return a video game. The game was open, so they said he could only exchange the game for the same one. He says, "Okay," and gets a new unopened video game. He then, with game in hand, looks at the same person and says, "I'd like to return this game, please." They actually let him do it. You know, of all the places that deserve to be gamed by multiple people repeatedly, Walmart is definitely up there. Let them have it. Back in middle school and high school, I was busted at home for looking at adult flicks. My parents had the MSN browser and internet service at the time. Their response was to ground me and change the password to get on the MSN account. This is during the years of dial-up. I discovered that I could type in any random digits into the password space to allow MSN to start the dial-up process and then minimize the window. The computer would connect to the internet, but not the MSN account. I would then open Internet Explorer and browse to my heart and hand's content, erase the internet history, and they were none the wiser. When Radio Shack had open locations nearby, I'd buy cheap $8 to $10 earbuds, and later cheap $10 to $20 pairs of over-ear headphones and get a warranty on them. Whether it was the quality of the stuff or me being an idiot, these would never last me more than a month or 2, so I'd go back, buy the same pair for a huge discount thanks to the warranty, and put a new warranty on those. Repeat, get $2 to $3 sets of earbuds and headphones forever. Or at least until all the Radio Shacks near me closed down. I guess this is kind of a loophole? One of my proudest moments nonetheless. In the final semester of my senior year in high school, I decided to take a class called Physics 2. I liked the first physics class I took. I thought this would be a fun class to go out on. Wrong. It was basically AP Physics. I was in way over my head. It's just that physics was a subject I couldn't easily understand. I failed a lot of tests. At the end of the semester, I had a D- going into the final. I'm freaking out at this point, thinking that my college acceptance is going to be pulled. Our final project is about buoyancy. The task is to build a boat that could support you and your partner out of nothing but cardboard, glue, and 20 feet of duct tape. If you could paddle to the end of a pool and back with you and your partner in the boat, you get an A on that aspect of the project. Great! Then my teacher made the mistake of offering extra incentive. For every length of the pool you could go beyond that without sinking, you'd get 40 extra credit points. Extra credit was my only hope. We went out and found the sturdiest cardboard we could find. We carefully folded, glued, and cut the cardboard into a canoe-type boat. It looked great. The day finally came, my entire class brought their boats out and we started. Most people made it to the end of the pool before their boats started to disintegrate. One group made it back and forth 13 times before they sank. Whoa! We were the very last team. We go in and start paddling. We make it to the end and paddle back. Then out and back again, and again, and again. We crossed the pool 60 times before our teacher made us stop. We didn't sink, and we both earned 2,400 extra credit points. I went from a D- to an A on the very last final I ever had in school. True story and one of my greatest days. When I was in high school, we figured out that we could use the Hooked on Phonics automated toll-free number to make free phone calls from payphones. We would dial 1-800-ABC-DEFG, and once prompted, we would enter 1, 2, 3, 4 3 times. The calls would then drop and we would get a dial tone, and then could call anyone we wanted to. Probably saved a good $4.75 with that one. Several years back, McDonald's started offering free Big Macs if you went online and completed a survey. At the end of the survey, the site would give you a coupon code, write the code onto the receipt, and the receipt becomes a coupon for a free Big Mac. A few years ago, I made 2 back-to-back purchases, thus getting 2 receipts. After completing both surveys, I was given the same coupon code for both receipts, and both of them worked at the register. I got 2 free Big Macs. Over time and with some casual experimentation, I realized that the coupon codes didn't seem to expire. I started saving a few bucks by finding discarded McDonald's receipts on the ground, writing the code on it, and getting a free Big Mac. It's been about 3 years since I made this discovery, and the coupon code still works. I haven't paid for a Big Mac in 3 years. Walgreens was running a deal on a blood sugar monitor that was originally $19.99. They had a weekly deal where it dropped down to $9.99, plus you got 2,000 points free on your balance reward card. I found a coupon for that exact meter which got me $10 off, so the meter became free. Plus I got $2 in balance points. I have about 20 meters sitting in my house that will be going to a lower-income clinic where people who need it but can't afford it will benefit the most from it. This site that delivers pretty good quality frozen food had a really good temporary sign-up deal. Put $50 of food in your cart, sign up with a new account, and they'd take $30 off plus free shipping. This stacked with the current deals like 4 packages of filled pasta for $5 and massive frick-off chocolate cake plus liter of ice cream plus raspberries for $20. I've moved out of home but only 5 to 10 minutes away from my parents. Either the place didn't notice or didn't care that the same credit card placed 2 orders for 2 different names and addresses. That cake was great. What's the biggest dating WTF that you've ever experienced? Had a Tinder date and the guy bought his girlfriend and asked for a threesome without saying a word about it in advance. I gotta wonder how many times he's tried that and what the success rate is. I'm choosing to believe that he didn't even tell the girlfriend about it in advance. He just turned up and said, "Ladies, I've got a proposition for you." Girl told me within 15 minutes of our first meeting that she was doing the deed with a married coworker, and her favorite part was seeing him cry with guilt after it was over. Holy crap, not only doing that but bringing it up on a date 15 minutes in. This is the first comment that actually makes me really mad. Yeah, usually something you bring up on the second date. I think I would literally just get up and leave without saying a word, like I'd never seen her before. 1. She was so wrapped up in her phone that she didn't notice I'd moved over and started a conversation with some other guests. 2. Asked if she could bring a friend to feel safe, completely understandable, and I was fine with it. She brought her best friend and her date. Both girls ignored us pretty much all night and we left without them. He turned out to be a pretty cool guy though, and he invited me to join for weekend football, where I made even more friends. Maybe she just wanted free food. I've heard stories of people that meet online and go on dates and their date just doesn't interact with them. Like one-word answers, on their phone, no eye contact, orders anything they want, being rude, etc. I once got catfished on Tinder. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? This person had me meet them and acted as if they were not a different person. One of the craziest experiences of my life. You got catfished and gaslighted at the same time? Gasfished? Catlighted? Gatflished. A girl I'd been seeing for a couple of weeks or so asked me to go with her to a funeral of some guy that I didn't know. What I didn't expect was that the funeral was for her fiancé. I got out of there real quick once I realized why everyone was shooting me glares the whole time. I was the side piece. This story is just so wildly uncomfortable and horrifying that if I ever accompany a date to a funeral, I'm going to be checking in advance to see if the venue has a built-in ejector seat for the guests before I confirm. If anything, they should have been shooting her those glares. Who brings a date to their fiancé's funeral? My wife likes to ask me silly questions like, "Would you cry at my funeral?" To curb this one, my response was, "Well, I wouldn't want to look like a B-word in front of my new girlfriend." I'm quite proud of this one. Beehive Girl. She had a Marge Simpson hairdo about 18 inches high. She was an actor and couldn't understand why roles would demand that she cut her hair, so she turned them down. I went on 3 dates with her just to hear her stories. She was totally oblivious that she was the problem. It was like I was watching a soap opera or something, but she was serious. This could be a pretty amazing Seinfeld episode. I went on a Tinder date with this one girl whose bio said something like, "You won't like me, I'm a disaster." Spoiler alert, she was right. But she was pretty attractive, so we went to get tea at a local hipster joint. She was obviously depressed. She told me about her hyper-competent other personality that she sometimes slips into and how her current life goal was to move several states away from her family and work at a gas station, even though she was a senior bio major. As the date was ending, she freaked out, saying that she forgot her backpack in her last class but doesn't have a car to get back. Apparently her mum dropped her off and then went home, half an hour away in the suburbs. So I took her to get her backpack, then she told me that she needed me to drive to her house because it was late and no bus was running there. So I drove her half an hour back to her parents' house in the suburbs. On the way, she told me that she actually has a boyfriend, but sometimes she likes to see what's out there, and that this is what our date was. Oh, and she's also pretty sure she's a lesbian, but likes the power involved in getting a guy to like her. For some reason, we never saw each other again. That's a pretty good example of the term crappy person. The setup for the comeback is real, though. Too bad it didn't work out this time, huh? Drop her at the curb? How did you keep from dumping her at the closest 7-Eleven and heading for a bar? At least you're not the boyfriend, so I guess life could have been worse. I had a guy ask me out on a date and he suggested a Japanese restaurant I liked. After I ordered, the server asked him what he wanted and he said he wasn't hungry. I asked him if he wanted to wait until he was hungry, but he said no, he just wanted to watch me eat. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but his expression said he wasn't joking. The sushi was good though. Because people are asking, I paid for my food at the end and he didn't offer. If he paid, I would have felt crazy guilty rather than being weirded out. No second date, I take it. Nope, but my relationship with that Japanese restaurant is still going strong. This guy went on and on about how he hated promiscuity and whores. Later on that night, he tried to go up my shirt and touch my chest. I stopped him and said, "I thought you hated promiscuity." Oh, he was using code for, "I hate girls that won't sleep with me." My ex in high school asked me to shave every last hair on my body, like everything except for my eyebrows. I refused, so she dumped me. She's now married to a guy with alopecia. No joke. Hey, I guess there's someone out there for everyone. But they don't have eyebrows. She's probably still hunting for the perfect mate. Could always Sharpie those bad boys on. I think I was like 17 or 18 at the time. We were fooling around. He starts suckling on me and says, in a baby voice, "Baby, what's his milky?" I really hope you busted out laughing. This sounds like a green text. Oh my god. Just told my husband this story recently when we were driving around the town we grew up in and reminiscing about our teen years. There was a guy who I'd seen around town, usually across the street from a bus stop I used often, that I thought was super cute. I wound up meeting him a couple of years later at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. And he was cool, and remembered me from that bus stop. Apparently he had been into me from afar as well. And we decided to move to the front of the house to speak privately and possibly make out. Well, he was super drunk, and we talked and sat next to each other on the front steps, and as the conversation dwindled and our faces moved closer to kiss, inches away from each other, he turns and vomits like a fire hose between his legs. I tried to comfort him a bit and then went back to the party and left shortly after. He felt terrible and asked me out later, and I said, "Frick it, let's not totally blow this guy off. Everyone gets super drunk sometimes, sure." But his idea of a date was taking me to a graveyard in broad daylight to get drunk, and I realized he was very, very dumb, and I never spoke to him again. I was 17, my boyfriend was 20 or 21. We were out to dinner at a fancy place with his parents. He loudly turned to me and said, "By the way, since you won't sleep with me, I'm banging other girls." with his parents inches away. That dinner became incredibly awkward after that. To clarify, I was a virgin and not ready yet. Could I just say if that was my 21-year-old son, I'd spank him like a freaking toddler over the table. If it was my son, I would have sent him home and enjoyed the fancy dinner with his ex-girlfriend. Well, enjoyed is a strong word, it would probably still be awkward. I once went on a date where I probably said like 5 words. Girl just talked for over an hour and a half without ever including me in the conversation. Just reminisced, complained, and bragged about her life for over 90 minutes straight. I was so taken aback that I just kind of drove home wondering if that experience was real or not. Not a date, but this reminds me of one of my girlfriend's friends. She kept telling my girlfriend how she wanted to meet me and all that. Had a dinner. Not a single question was asked by her. It was all about her and her mother and her weird racist tangent about how she, a white woman, couldn't see Black Panther in her home state of North Carolina for fear of being jumped and mugged by the black people in attendance. I would actually hazard a guess that the woman in question may not have had many friends due to her, let's say, garrulousness and crappy opinions, and was looking forward to meeting the new boyfriend because it meant someone she would have a free pass to run her mouth with and have him not walk out because he didn't want to annoy his date. In my junior college days, had a girl invite me over for a study date. Her dad was home and we actually studied at the kitchen table. Dad seemed cool from the little conversation we had. Aside from a 7-Eleven run for snacks and cigs, her dad was 10 feet away from us the whole time. I thought the date went well, we talked more than we studied, made tentative plans to see a movie. Couple of days later, I texted her, "What's your weekend looking like so we can check out a flick? Grab some dinner." She replies back it's not going to work, she wants someone more forceful. I was like, what? Apparently her running to her bedroom a few times for things she forgot was her hint to me that I was supposed to follow and pounce, I guess. I was very new to the city and ended up setting up a date with a girl off Tinder. I spent a lot of time looking into cool bars and suggested a bunch to her, but she ended up really wanting to go to a certain bar, like wouldn't take no for an answer. I looked it up, it looked okay, nothing really that special. I figured she had some sort of thing with the people who worked there where she could escape if the date went bad. Fast forward to the date, it's going really well, she's absolutely gorgeous, and the conversation is really easy. I bring up the choice of bar and why she was so adamant on this one. She said her ex-boyfriend works there, and that threw me off, but I figured they broke up a while ago now and are just friends. So I questioned further, asking how long ago they broke up, and she tells me 2 weeks ago, and that he is currently our bartender. I look over at the bar, and this massive 280-pound guy is giving me the biggest death stare. I was wondering all night why he was being such a prick to me, and now I understood. I got out of there pretty quickly after that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A guy I saw for less than a month, if I recall correctly, took it upon himself to vent any problems relating to the relationship that we had to a male friend of mine he didn't really know well at all. In retrospect, he was a peculiar guy in many different ways, and this hampered his ability to make his own friends to whom he could vent and get advice from. At the time, however, it was incredibly strange for my friend, who explicitly told him several times, "Dude, Sheila's my friend, not you. I have no idea who you are. Please don't come to me with complaints about her." I think it took about 4 or 5 tries and my dumping of him for him to understand it. Some guy took my glasses, ran out of the restaurant with them, and I got a text like 15 minutes later of him taking a selfie in them at his place. He said if I wanted them back, I would have to come over to his place. Holy crap, what a butthole. Did you mention an alternative of, or the police could come and get them? I honestly really should have done that. This was while I was in the Marines. I met up with this girl from POF, all seemed well from our chats and texting, so we decided to meet up for a date in Palm Springs. Nothing out there yet. I get there to find out she has kids, which she has brought along but never told me about having kids whatsoever, and without missing a beat, she asks me right there to have a contract marriage. I spit my drink out ASAP while she tried to explain how it would benefit the both of us. I just looked at her with a stern look, told her to get her crap together, told her to lose my number, and walked the frick out. Hey baby, want some TRICARE? She is the textbook definition of a dependent. She had previously told me how irresponsible her sister was. Her sister received a positive result for herpes. Sister thought it meant she was clean and didn't have it. I don't get the logic either. A few weeks later, we had been seeing each other pretty casually and she mentions that her sister wanted to swap. Yeah, no thanks. On a third or fourth date, I went back to his apartment to have a glass of wine. We had a great evening until near the end he said, "Wow, I can't believe you passed almost every test." Turns out he set up his apartment with small girlfriend tests. He made sure there was little to no toilet paper to see if I would change the roll, if I rinsed my dishes, if I turned out the lights behind me, where I put my jacket and shoes, etc. Needless to say, there were no further dates. That was no man. That's his mother wearing his skin, testing you. This gave me a chill. Like, he just couldn't wait to reveal his master plan? That he'd put her through the gauntlet of girlfriend material tests? Yeah, major D-bag. Now, setting up one or two of those small tests in and of itself isn't inherently terrible and will make for a nice story a couple of weeks or months later, but in fact that, for him, the whole date seemed to revolve around those tests is a red flag. The secret final test is to have her fight his ex. Not major, online match, meet for dinner. She tells me she's lactose intolerant, proceeds to order food with lots of dairy products. The restaurant was small and in an old house, so the bathroom was the single closet style that happened to be less than 10 feet from our table. Her food upset her, so she uses that loudly and leaves the door open after she's done. Yep. Still asks if we can go get ice cream afterwards. Ugh, that girl likes to party. I'd been dating this guy for about a month. I knew he was pretty freshly out of another relationship. We were having beers on a patio at a tap house nearby, and his phone rings and he answers it and proceeds to talk to who I realized was his ex. They were arguing and talking about their breakup, all while he was sitting at the table with me. After about an hour and a few beers later, a guy at the table next to me gave me a kind of nod to join his table. I did. We talked about what an idiot the other guy was being. We spent the next couple of hours chatting, D-bag left when his phone call was over, and my new friend and I ended up dating for a year, and we're still friends to this day. I've been on and off the dating app life for a couple of years now. I just got my first big boy job and moved to a new area. I matched with this cute girl who was a junior in a college nearby. We had a nice first date, got coffee and walked around. We set up plans to grab lunch that weekend. During lunch, we decided to go on an impromptu hike. I drove us to my house to grab some water, snacks, change clothes, and we had a nice hike. Everything was going pretty darn well. We texted and kept up throughout the week. That Friday, I was at a friend's house. We had a few drinks, so I didn't feel comfortable driving back home. He didn't have an Android charger and my phone was dying, so I sent a courtesy text to let her know I was going to be out of commission for a while. The next morning, I get home and charge in my phone. After a few seconds, I get a slew of text messages, around 50, all from her. It was a spiral into insanity. At first, she told me to have fun and have a good night. Then it went to, "Hey, are you free?" to, "Why aren't you talking to me?" And near the latter, she mentioned she drove to my house and didn't see my car. She accused me of sleeping around. Basically, any and every insecurity got projected onto me within a couple of hours, all while I was asleep. I called it off immediately. She probably had some deeper issues, and I hope she's gotten help or is happy. It was just the transition from a few nice dates to that night that made me really take a step back and go, what the actual frick? People who do this, think your complicated feelings through, condense them into a concise message, or sleep on it and leave it at that. You're only going to drive folks away with your walls of text. Case in point, my ex was kinda like this. She was totally normal until she had a lot of personal issues happen all at once, and just kind of lost her crap after about 2 to 3 years of normal dating. I can't have my phone on me at work a lot. Sometimes I'd turn it on at the end of the day and it would start with, "Hi, how are you?" and progress into, "Are you actually at work?" and, "Oh my god, you'd better not be with someone else, you fricking hussy." And she'd eventually work herself back to calm and be like, "I'm just so crazy sometimes, that's why you love me." Hint: this does not make someone love you. She did this about once a week along with other crazy crap like spying on all my texts and Facebook messages and harassing my female friends. I finally broke up with her when she refused to get any therapy. The last fight we had was her screaming at me about how dare I get my master's degree before her, and I clearly did it on purpose to make her feel worse about her life. To clarify, I did struggle to keep our relationship intact for almost 2 more years of full-on crazy psycho behavior, but there's only so much crap you can take before it starts affecting your own mental health as well. And also, for the record, it did make me realize that all these women I knew who were in terrible relationships that I was, like, she should just leave them. Yeah, Now I realize it's not actually that easy when you love someone. Oh my god, I used to be like this. It's like relationship PTSD. It happens when you've gotten gaslighted or cheated on, or have a few other things happen to you that leave you with trust issues. I did a lot of therapy that only marginally helped. It got better only after I was in a stable relationship for a little while, where my partner provided strong boundaries like, I understand where you're coming from, but here's what behavior I will accept and which ones I won't accept. Staying within that structure means now it's downgraded to minor freakouts and play wrestling when they won't tell me what they're laughing about on their phone. I said something the guy I was dating at the time didn't like, so to punish me, he punched himself 3 times in the jaw and knocked out a tooth. A year ago, I met up with a girl I met on a dating site. We went out for coffee and had a good talk about movies and video games. Then, everything got weird and she asked if she could read me some of her poetry about her ex-boyfriend cheating on her. She proceeded to sob in public in the middle of the poem and wouldn't stop until she was finished with her very long poem, despite being a blubbering, sniffling mess. There was no second date. Her next date heard her poems about her date with the guy who didn't like poetry. Her date after that was easier because she could just reuse the poems from the previous date. On 2 separate occasions, I've gone home with the guy after a perfectly lovely first date to find an array of adult bedroom toys laid out on the bed, ready for use. Don't get me wrong, I'm generally down, but you can't just spring that on someone, guys. There has to be a discussion before you bring out a leather hood and a Flogotron 3000. In both cases, there was no second date. He made me Uber to him, $20 one way to a nice building, so we could Uber together to a bar by my condo. Cost me $40 to go somewhere 2 blocks from my place. I don't get it. He then pulled a pint of Svedka out and chugged it in one shot at the bar. He ordered 2 drinks and shoved me the bill. He hit on the bartender in a language I don't speak. She was very uncomfortable. He then asked me where I lived. Told him the name of the building. He decided that he liked my building better than his and wanted to stay with me for a few days to check it out and buy a penthouse. I said no, but he could contact a realtor. He went bat crap crazy. I looked down and he's on Tinder while screaming at me. He showed me a girl and said he was going to frick her if I didn't let him in. I told him to go for it, I'm not interested. He followed me the whole walk to my place, stumbling, grabbing my arm and screaming at me. He tried to steal my purse. The police ended up coming up to me and holding him long enough for me to get home. He sent me a series of bizarre threatening messages that night and kept randomly messaging me that he loved me, I'm a B-word, I'm his only hope, he was going to have his way with me against my will. I posted about it on Facebook and some other friends had run-ins with him. Guess he's homeless and was getting by staying at people's houses and borrowing their stuff to look like he's somewhat wealthy to con more people. If I'd let him in, I'd have been screwed. It was a crap show of events for a first date. Here's the short version of an insanely crazy date. Took a girl out hiking. She bought a machete. She stripped down into the buff and started whacking through the foliage with her blade, and then got mad at me and threw roadkill at me. Have you ever witnessed a bride or groom say, I do not, at a wedding? While working in the wedding industry for over 17 years, we've hosted on average 140 weddings per year. 10 plus years ago, we had a wedding and the groom and his groomsmen arrived, taking pictures, joking around, guests all arrived, took their seats, and about 5 minutes before the wedding was supposed to start, the bride's limo pulled up to the chapel. The bride's father got out, walked inside the chapel, walked to the microphone and stated the wedding was called off. His daughter would not be getting married today. He directed myself and my staff to still feed and liquor up all the guests since he'd already paid for all 170 people and got back into the limo and left. I never heard what the reason was, but that was by far the most awkward event I ever managed. It was a joke, but he was too nervous and it didn't really work. Everyone that heard him called him a jackass that ruined his own wedding. I was humiliated for him. I was in attendance where the pastor says, repeat after me, for better or for worse, and the groom said, for better and for better. Everyone chuckled, but there was a hint of honesty there. They divorced after 9 months. I had a friend who decided to have a whole staged scene at this moment, with a mini soap opera playing out in the middle of the wedding. A mutual friend who was pregnant stood up and said that the baby was the groom's, and her husband flipped out. All the wedding party had scripted lines like, "Shut up, Susan, you know you lost your chance with him after the disappearance of your mysterious twin sister." The bride and groom were all in on it. It took the rest of the people only a few lines to realize that this was a joke. Fun was had by all, until about 3 months later when the soap opera actually happened and she cheated on him with his friend. Groom said, "I don't." awkward silence, and then, it was a joke, followed by a longer, more awkward silence. Pranked ya! Yes, at my cousin's wedding. The bride suddenly backed out at the last second. The wedding was abruptly cancelled and we, the family of the groom, all went to a restaurant instead. The bride was kind of a B-word who was abusive towards my cousin and extorts him for his money, so we were all relieved that this happened. I guess bullet dodged, I suppose? Shame about the literal tens of thousands of dollars they'd probably spent up to that point, but what can you do? One of the times my father went to the altar after my mum had divorced him. He was what you'd call a serial groom. In any event, the wedding was being hosted at someone's house and they got in front of the minister and decided not to get married. But they were both drunks and there was a lot of booze stocked up and why let it all go to waste? So they decided to get crap show drunk and have a party. I don't remember her name as it would have been his 5th marriage at the time. He eventually hit marriage number 5, walked away from an engagement one more time and was engaged yet again when he died. Not exactly that, but an acquaintance of mine was getting married. A few days before the wedding, they realized they weren't going to make it as a couple. However, because everything was paid for, they agreed to go through with it. Apparently, they fooled people quite well, as a friend who was invited told me that they looked so in love, but I knew it was just an act. A few months later, they quietly went their separate ways. So I'm guessing they never signed anything to make the marriage official, they just had a party. That's a safe bet. Getting married takes paperwork, so if you just don't submit it, you're off the hook. My cousin did this, actually unbeknownst to his then-wife. They moved to a different state right after the ceremony and were going to file the paperwork there, and things immediately got kind of rocky. My cousin decided to just not submit the paperwork and didn't tell his wife. He kept trying to make it work. I think he did love her, but knew that she wasn't all in. When the wife finally decided to ask for a divorce about 6 months later, he was like, "Guess what? We don't have to pay." Before anyone goes, "Oh my god, what a prick," yes, my cousin is notoriously a D-bag, but he wasn't trying to screw her over or anything either. She had a lot of mental health problems, and in hindsight, their lives needed to go in different directions. My cousin paid for her to resettle back home and finish her college degree while he did his own thing. My buddy was so nervous he blurted out, "I do," the first time the priest addressed him. Same thing happened at my cousin's wedding. It got a pretty good laugh from everybody, bride and groom got embarrassed and red-faced, and the bride continued to giggle from nervousness throughout the entire thing up until the actual I do's and kiss. Just adorable all round. Saw a guy who was too drunk to even say "I do." Amazingly, they went through with it. Split up 6 months later. Turns out he'd cheated on the bride the night before. Stay classy. There's no better way to celebrate the most important day of your relationship than by getting so drunk you don't remember any of it. I was at a wedding where the bride didn't turn up. Was horribly awkward whilst the groom just refused to agree that she wasn't coming. We all sat there for over an hour waiting. We were taken through for drinks, and the groom and main members of the wedding party disappeared. Apologies were made by the staff, dinner was served for anyone who'd stuck around, and then we all went home. Bride had freaked out. Apparently she did still want to get married, but the groom refused to go through it all again. They're still together though. Yeah, the pastor got the bride's name wrong. The groom was like, "I do not." All was well though, everyone got a pretty good laugh out of it. Highlight of the entire ceremony. I know a wedding manager and he only witnessed it once, but the groom meant it as a joke. He had some sort of bet going. The bride got mad and ran out of church. I just picture this annoying 90s groom. "I do not." Then grinning and looking around for approval. It's pretty much Ace Ventura doing this in my mind. "Dude, it was a joke, come back!" Here in the Netherlands, if you say no, or maybe, or anything else that's not clearly an affirmation, even if it's clearly meant as a joke, the wedding is off, and the person leading the ceremony is legally obligated to leave the premise to make sure the wedding cannot be legally completed. This is to prevent forced marriages. All the bride or the groom has to do to make sure they're not getting married is to say no briefly. Nobody can force the marriage to continue after that. So in the Netherlands, the guy would have ruined the entire day and thus deserved all of the crap the bride could give him. I was at a wedding officiated by an ancient Catholic priest. He muddled his way through the ceremony but seemed to fall into the regular Sunday Mass rhythm, forgetting that this was a wedding. Eventually he started to say the "Our Father" in one of the last parts of the ceremony. The congregation, following along on our ceremony booklets, realizes something is wrong and start to rustle uncomfortably. Eventually, the best man went up to the priest and whispered in his ear. The priest was startled and muttered, "Oh, I forgot about that part." He then went on to ask the bride and groom if they actually wanted to get married. They both said, "I do." Next, he forgot the "you may kiss the bride" line, so we all waited uncomfortably again until my friend shouted, "Kiss!" They kissed, we clapped, and they all lived happily ever after. In conclusion, old priest forgets to ask bride and groom if they wanted to get married. They did. Not exactly. The couple was so emotional that they just couldn't answer. They're the sweetest of people who were burned so badly in previous marriages that when things finally went right for them, they both broke down a little. The priest made a little joke about love, let them calm down, and started that part of the ceremony all over again. I know it's not exactly I do not, but when my parents got married and the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," my dad said, "Do I have to?" At my wedding, when the pastor was done talking, he was like, Steve, you can go ahead. Give her a kiss." It sounded freaking stupid, and I felt robbed that I didn't get the usual, "You may kiss the bride" line. One of my friends is so uncomfortable with public affection that she and her husband high-fived instead of kissing. My aunt was with an abusive butthole and decided not to go through on the day of, and didn't show up. My grandfather went up and stood on the stage and said something along the lines of, "There won't be a wedding tonight, but stay for dinner and drinks on me." Maybe that contributed to a 100% more jovial atmosphere at the reception, if the woman was that unpleasant to be around. Hope the groom was okay, though. Not my story, but I heard about a friend of my ex-girlfriend getting married about 3 days before the wedding. The girl her fiancé was cheating on her with showed up at her door. She was crying hysterically and said, "I can't let you marry him. He's been cheating on you for 2 years. Please don't marry him." But it got colder from there. The girl went through with everything until it was time for the vows, and when it was her turn to say "I do," she clasped her hands and said, "I do not." Everyone kind of uncomfortably chuckled, going, I wonder if they rehearsed this. When she goes, "I do not marry the man who has lied to my face for 2 years. I do not marry the man who crept out of my bedroom when I was asleep to the neighbor's apartment to crawl into bed with her. I do not marry the man who stands here with me, humiliating me, my friends, and my family on what was supposed to be my special day. I do not, in the eyes of the church, forgive this man nor take him to be mine." It seemed like the story was going to come to a head, but apparently she just walked away crying and none of the guests knew what to make of it all. Apparently there was tremendous confusion. As a wedding DJ, something like this is a personal nightmare of mine. I frequently play music for the ceremony and processional, and I would have no idea what to play after a scene like this. Maybe just some light jazz while everyone gathers their wits. Yes, my own sister did this at her wedding. She was marrying this guy basically just for his money, and she apparently found out his business was failing, and he was no longer a millionaire a few weeks before the ceremony. She wanted to embarrass him, so she did not call it off right away and dropped the bomb at the last second. Sounds like she's an awful human being. She is. Tell her I hate her. Thanks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not even close to the same, but at my wedding I spaced out while the officiant was talking. When it got time for "I do," I was just staring blankly out the window. My now wife got my attention, and I had to ask what was going on. I said, "I do. We didn't practice that part, sorry." This is adorable. My best friend got married recently, and the groom was staring out the window while the officiant was talking, and suddenly made a really shocked and scared face, and started to look panicked, and clearly wasn't listening. I was really concerned, but the rest of the ceremony went fine, and it turns out he realized in that moment he had forgotten a piece of the paper he needed during the ceremony. From this, we can discover grooms, and men in relationships generally, could benefit from discreetly well-placed teleprompters. Now there is a business model. I've been at a wedding where the bride basically said, "No, I don't submit to my husband." They had to ask the officiant not to use any of that language when exchanging vows. He obviously didn't listen, and she just crossed her arms and said, "No, I do not," when that part of the vows came about. They still got married, and as far as I know, they live happily together. That whole wedding weekend was a circus from beginning to end. I knew a guy here in Pittsburgh whose bride just didn't show up. He decided to go around and invite some local homeless folks to feed them with the catering he had paid for. He's a fairly wealthy dude, so I'm sure the food was no fire hall special either. Crappy thing, but a hell of a guy. Never, but my sister did mess up her lines. She got so nervous it took 10 minutes. The "do" comes after "I." The confusion is understandable. Pretty close. My ex-father-in-law, a retired judge, was officiant at a friend's wedding. They wrote their own vows and didn't run them by him beforehand, but I can't remember exactly how they went. It was something like, "With me, you will never be alone. Together, you need not fear sickness or loss. I won't ever leave your side." When they were done, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't accept those vows. Legally speaking, I need a clear and affirmative statement of consent from both of you. And you phrased everything as a negative. Do you want to be married? Please answer in a clear, articulated statement of affirmative consent." They both said, "I do," and had a little laugh, and that was that. They were married. Not me, but an old high school friend who was cheating before her wedding was getting married and lightning hit the steeple right after they said their vows. Falling rock damaged some cars parked on the street next to the church. They lasted about a year. I kept a piece of the steeple for a long time and then tossed it a few years later when I realized it was probably bad luck. I want to believe the piece of steeple had a purpose. It washed up on a beach somewhere where another troubled couple were honeymooning, became a murder weapon, went on its way to many great home-wrecking adventures, but only the doomed ones. I would binge-watch that series. Yes, but it was purely a mistake. But before the bride could process what she had said, the man passed out and hit his head on a church pew, splitting it wide open. The wedding was stopped and his head was sewn up after it was revealed that the bride indeed made a mistake. Needless to say, the groom was on pain meds and hitting the alcohol did not help. It was all a big laugh afterwards, same couple still married. 15 to 20 years now. When I was getting married, the officiant, clerk at the courthouse, an older gentleman who had been in the business long enough to marry my parents, asked me if I would take my wife to be my wife. After I said I do, he then turned to her and asked, "And do you take John to be your wife?" To which she smiled, not skipping a beat, and said, "I take him to be my husband, yes." There was a pause where the clerk looked at her funny and then he covered his face. "I said wife, didn't I?" There was a nice round of laughter for us and our immediate family and friends, followed by his sincerest apologies. I'm constantly reminded I'm the most handsome wife in the world. This isn't an I do not situation, but at my wedding, my officiant, embarrassingly, confused me by asking questions like, "Will you take care of your wife forever? Will you hold her dear? Will you support her?" Typical wedding questions? So I looked at my wife and said, "I will." I immediately realized my mistake and stammered out, "I do." I felt like an idiot, but hey, my wife gave me her right hand instead of her left for the wedding ring, so it all balanced out. I don't know if this was horrifically awkward from an audience perspective or a wedding full of cute rom-com-esque mistakes. I think it could have seemed either way. I seriously felt like saying it, but I didn't have the cojones. Fights started in the honeymoon and marriage lasted 1.3 years. If you feel like saying it on your wedding day, do it. It's so much easier than navigating a divorce. No, but almost. I made a Princess Bride reference when we were sitting down with our officiant for the first time. We chuckled and he never mentioned it again. Until the wedding day, he did the whole bit, "Marriage is what brings us together today," and so on. The whole speech. My family was cracking up, but neither she nor her family have ever seen the movie. Honestly, I thought I was going to go to bed drunk and single that night. My now husband started fidgeting during the sermonettes leading up to the exchanging of the vows. The minister asked if we were ready to exchange them, and he said, "Not yet." They didn't capture my reaction, nor did they get my daughters holding back my, in full dress blues, marine son. He leaned towards the minister and said he forgot the rings in the car. His son, who was taping the wedding, ran out and got them. My father-in-law yelled out, "He didn't get that from me." Afterwards, the minister and the wedding planner said that it had never happened before. Neither one asked my husband beforehand because he seemed so calm. Not at the wedding, but at the rehearsal dinner the night before. Bride and groom's mother got into a fight out in the front of the restaurant. The groom said, "I'm not marrying you until you apologize to my family and promise you'll fix this." The bride refused, groom called off the marriage. Bride decided to still have the reception and slept with the groom's roommate. Come to find out later she was only marrying him for his parents' money. Safe to say the groom dodged a bullet. This comes from a fellow I know who photographed weddings. The groom, at the reception after the wedding ceremony, giving his groom's speech to a packed reception hall, thanks the best man for sleeping with his wife the night before and walks out. I was in a wedding party that got super close to derailing. We coordinated a meet-up before the ceremony for wedding pictures near some train tracks in an unfamiliar city. The groom didn't do the best job of communicating to the bride the actual location, causing the bride's side to be late. This sent the bride into a fit of rage, saying such colourful phrases as, "You always do this, I hate you," to, "I'm calling off the fricking wedding." This made for an incredibly awkward first look, mind you. While the bride was screaming bloody murder, the groom was off in the distance with his head down and back turned to us. Within moments, I got a text from him stating that he'd just adjusted his fantasy football lineup and was good to go. Pictures commenced and the wedding went off with a few more major hitches, including the bride crying and almost backing out moments before the walk. They expect their first child soon. I did see a couple signing marriage papers at the municipal building in my county, and then he decided after she signed that he wasn't really interested in being married. They talked it out, he got water dumped on him, and we all got a show. No, but I've seen someone object when the priest asked, did anyone have a reason as to why the marriage shouldn't go forth? And it was my drunk, troublemaking cousin who professed her love for the groom. She got thrown out. I hope you were related to the bride. Not at the ceremony, but after the rehearsal dinner the night before, the bride saw the groom dancing with all her bridesmaids at the bar. Seemed like normal, fun, drunk stuff, but she flipped out and made a giant scene. Ended up sitting in the back seat of my car, my wife was in the wedding, bawling and refusing to talk to the groom. After like 30 seconds of people trying to talk sense into her, she told us to take her to her parents' house. We get there, take her inside, and leave. The next morning we find out the wedding is off. Apparently, the groom came over and she yelled at him, said she didn't love him, didn't want to go through with the wedding. The groom finally said, okay, fine. Then she turned it into, he called off the wedding, and became the victim. She ended up keeping the gigantic ring, going on the expensive honeymoon with a friend, while her parents had to eat the cost of the ceremony and reception because it was too late to cancel. Rumors were it was around $50K. That afternoon, they brought around pieces of the wedding cake to everyone so it wouldn't go to waste. Our read on it was the bride never wanted to go through with it and this was her way out. I knew none of these people, so for me it was like watching a Jerry Springer episode. Me and another guy who no one knew just sat back and watched it all unfold, going, this is awesome. The worst/best I've seen in person was a bride saying, I need a minute, leaving and then coming back a minute later to say I do. I was thoroughly confused, but it turns out she had been engaged before, and that man had died in a violent accident, and some memories came flooding back. My husband said, do I have to, when he was asked to say his vows. The judge said, do it or you aren't getting married today. He did it. My husband thinks he's funny. He's not. During the rehearsal dinner, I said, yabba dabba doo. I was at a destination wedding where the bride called it off the night before. It was an awkward vacation for the two families for the rest of the week. One of the resort guests, not related to the wedding, wrote about it in their TripAdvisor review. I used to be a bartender and once had a rehearsal dinner where the groom found out that his younger brother, also a groomsman, had lost his virginity to the bride-to-be. The details of when the act had happened never made it to me, and despite my best detective work, I was never able to figure out whether or not the wedding actually went through. In my 16 years as a wedding photographer, I never had a I don't moment, but I did see many grooms and brides show up extremely late and very drunk. I had a lesbian couple break up on their honeymoon because one of them fooled around with the masseuse, and I had two couples break up the day before the wedding for cheating, and one bride that stumbled down the aisle after taking 3 Xanax with champagne. There are so many more. Oh, the stories I could tell. What's the worst case of helicopter parents that you've ever seen? I had a friend in middle or high school who was a Chinese girl adopted by an old white couple who were super weird and overprotective. Some of the things I remember about her parents: Mum volunteered at whatever school we were at and would sit with us at lunch to make sure her daughter was eating. They drove a minivan and made her sit in a car seat in the very back row until like freshman year of high school. Anytime someone praised them for raising such a good daughter, they would laugh and say, "She's not our daughter, she's adopted." They wouldn't let her ride the school bus, join any clubs, or hang out with anyone after school. When she got her driver's license, the dad brought light sticks, like air traffic controller sticks. Anytime she left the house, he would stand in the street with his light sticks and blocked traffic so that people wouldn't hit her as she backed out of the driveway. It was hilarious to watch, but she was completely mortified. This one broke my heart. My little brother is adopted, and I've lost my crap at people who've tried to say he's not my brother. I can't imagine ever feeling or thinking that way myself. That poor girl. People like that have no place adopting. The light sticks bit is hilarious, though. I had a friend growing up whose mother was very protective. The father, not so much, but she was so bad that my parents called her Mama Hawk. I invited him to my 10th birthday party, which was at a laser tag place. His mum came, which was fine, but then while we were playing laser tag, she stood with him the whole time. Didn't play, just stayed by him. Really? What was she protecting him from? He turned out surprisingly normal and now lives 1,000+ miles away from her. I'm not sure how she deals with that. She probably thanks her lucky stars every night that he grew up a fine, well-adjusted young man living on his own, all because she boldly protected him from those deadly, deadly lasers. My friend wasn't allowed to use scissors until he was in high school. His parents were insane. You should have seen their reaction when he joined the army.
The army? Are you fricking insane? Do you want to live in constant fear? Do you want to have some psycho drill sergeant hovering over you and controlling your every fricking move?
No, Mom, that's why I'm leaving home and joining the army. I can imagine that there aren't many harsher forms of rebellion for a child of helicopter parents than leaving to an organization where you're both placed in harm's way and often completely cut off from contact. Hopefully that kid established some boundaries afterwards. Had a roommate freshman year whose mother called every day and stayed the first whole week of school. Alright. She would also randomly fly up to stay a week or two in the same bed with her daughter, accompanying her to all classes, meals, and social gatherings. The mum was afraid her daughter would not be pre-med anymore and would do anything to make sure she didn't change majors. I think what made this an extreme story was the fact that her mum flew in multiple times in one year and called every day all the way from India to the US. I work at a university. We had a parent get worried because he had not contacted her in a while and wasn't taking her calls. We tracked him down and it turned out he was just ignoring her because she called multiple times a day and was driving him crazy. I was a resident assistant in college and received a call at 3 in the morning to do a wellness check on a resident. We lived in the townhouses and it was winter, so I had to bundle up and started trudging through the snow. I'm 3/4 of the way there when I get another call canceling the wellness check. The kid's mom was worried that he wasn't answering her calls. Turns out he was asleep at 3 in the morning. I was a charge nurse in a substance and alcohol rehab, and this 19-year-old kid was admitted for smack detox and treatment. His mum wanted to be there for the entire admission process, which isn't out of the ordinary for families. However, after the kid was admitted and shown to his room, his mum wouldn't leave. Detox patients would get assessments every 2 to 4 hours and were asked a series of questions to determine if they would need medication for withdrawal. His mother answered all his questions for him, and at the end of the assessment was like, he'll take 10 milligrams of Valium for his anxiety, all while this kid lay in bed watching TV. In this particular rehab, visitors, cell phones, and laptops were allowed, so we couldn't tell her to leave until visiting hours were over. That time arrives and you guessed it, she's still there. As the charge nurse, I had the honor of asking her to leave. Mum looked at me legitimately confused and replied, "I have to leave? I was going to stay here with my son. There are 2 beds in his room, so I didn't think it was a problem." I then explained to his mum that the second bed needed to be kept open for another potential admission. Then I was yelled at for not providing her son with a private room and that this guy in the admissions department said she could stay throughout her son's detox and treatment. I told her patients weren't allowed to have overnight guests. She was appalled because she thought that because she was the mother that she fit into some kind of loophole or something. After she left, she visited every day and stayed from the beginning of visiting hours to the end. When she wasn't there, her son was on the phone with her. Needless to say, this kid relapsed immediately after he finished treatment. In conclusion, Enabler Mother actually wanted to stay in her adult son's room while he was in rehab. Jesus, that poor kid.
If that was my mum, I'd use substances too. This makes me feel sad. She probably just wanted her son to get better. I mean, she was going about it in an insane way, but I don't even know what I would do if my son was in that situation.
Newly enrolled freshman in college, and the poor kid's mum would come to the school and walk with him through the cafeteria line, picking out what she thought he should be eating. She did this for all 3 meals. Poor guy was so embarrassed. Freshman move-in day 1, I hung out, ate, roamed around, went to a soccer game, and went home. 3 days later, my daughter calls me. "Oh my God, Mom, there are still parents here." She was horrified. I was too. My mum once got a job application for me, filled it out, signed it, submitted it, got it back, emailed them confirming that I'd take it, then she told me she'd picked up the application for me. So that. She's done far more embarrassing and helicopter-y things, but I don't want anyone recognizing me, so that's all for now. I actually forgot about a worse case than this while writing. A girl that was a year below me in high school ended up going to the same community college as me. Her mum sits outside of all her classes listening in. She also makes her daughter dress the same as her and wear the same hairstyle. Her daughter is legitimately brainwashed. She doesn't have any friends because everyone is too creeped out by the situation, and her mother probably wouldn't allow it anyways. I wish I could help her somehow, but there isn't really a CPS for young adults who are brainwashed. I find it amusing that the term in English is helicopter parents. I guess it's about how they hover over you. In Sweden, we call it curling parents, as in the sport curling. It's a reference to the players with the brooms who sweep the way for the curling rock. In this analogy, the child is the curling rock and the parents are sweeping the path for them through life. We refer to the ones who remove all obstacles for their kids as snowplow parents. Usually, snowplow and helicopters are one and the same, but not always. Friends with a girl in elementary school who had parents who wouldn't let her watch PG movies at the age of 12, even with parental guidance. She wasn't allowed to come over to my house because I mentioned my favorite movie at the time to them and it wasn't G-rated. She nearly drowned at the beach a couple of years ago getting caught in a riptide, suffered permanent brain damage from a lack of oxygen. Her parents now have the forever child that they always wanted. I worked with a mother who didn't want her adult son with autism to ride the bus because she was afraid that child predators might get him. Like, lady, there are valid reasons to be concerned about your 21-year-old son riding the bus, but those guys aren't one of them. I had a father question everything about my lesson planning and teaching methods during a parent-teacher meeting. I was well prepared and I fielded his questions very well. After asking probably 50 questions, he looks around the classroom with a big smirk and says, "Sorry to ask so many questions. I'm what you call a helicopter parent." In response, I told him I was more than happy to give him weekly updates about his son, as well as spending my office hours to sit down with him to help further. His response? "Oh, I'm much too busy for that." Worst helicopter parent ever. I had a father who worked as an administrator at another school who would constantly send me emails questioning my teaching methods. His son was in my class. He was friends with my evaluating principal, so I was concerned that my job might be at risk and started responding with, "I'm not comfortable discussing this via email, but I would be happy to meet with you." Of course, he was always too busy to meet with me in person. Shortly after this, he accompanied me on a field trip, but said nothing about his concerns and didn't speak to me at all. He was on his cell phone the whole trip. The next year, he was arrested for inappropriate behavior with young teenage boys, and my evaluating principal had resigned. Yuck. I don't think this is in the same category as the other parent copters, but I should have figured that there would be at least one whose absurdity transgressed the line into straight-up creepiness. Probably an acquaintance of mine. This guy, quote, knows that his son is going to be a great NFL quarterback. The kid turned 10 recently and is a decent player, but his father has him work with different trainers and spend hours each day practicing. He takes vitamins, has a special diet, and isn't allowed to play other sports because his dad wants him to focus completely on football and doesn't want him to risk an injury playing another sport that would sideline him for football. He can't have sleepovers or do any normal kid things. I know for a fact that the kid has told his parent that he doesn't want to play anymore, but the dad doesn't care. He says that as a parent, he has to do what is best for his kid. My sons play sports too, and they don't always want to go to practice, so I understand making them stick with something they signed up for. My kids know that they have to finish out a season, but I'm perfectly fine if they don't want to sign up for the next one. I just don't understand why someone would continue to sign their kid up for something they clearly don't want to do. It's a situation that I can't see ending well, honestly. Living vicariously through your children, especially to this degree, is one of the most harmful things you can do to them. I hope this kid manages to break free. I really do. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a troop commander in the army, I had a kid who came up hot for white snow in the pea in a cup test, and then a week later was arrested by the local police department task force for being an enforcer in a local civilian military substance ring. They charged him and remanded him back to the army custody, where I immediately started the paperwork to chapter him out and let the civilian justice system take its course. The guy was 23, I think. His mum called me several times to tell me that Chris has never been in any real trouble before and he's such a sweet kid. Anytime anything happened in high school, I helped him work it out. I need to come up and talk with you and get this sorted out. I was dumbfounded. The guy was 23 years old, in the army, and his mum thinks she can come in and work it out with me. I was polite for the first call, but by the second or third phone call, I'd had enough. I told her, again, not to bother coming up to the installation, that her son wasn't a sweet kid, or else he wouldn't have beaten some guy up for not paying money he owed to a local dealer, and that the whole reason he was in this mess in the first place was because his mum had never let him be accountable for his actions. I told her that he was under my authority now, and I had no time or patience for someone who didn't take their obligation to the army, the country, or their buddies seriously enough to keep themselves out of trouble long enough to make our upcoming deployment to Iraq. When she complained that getting a dishonorable discharge would ruin his life, I informed her that fortunately I didn't have the time to waste giving him a dishonorable discharge, so he would be okay on that score. Other than honorable is what he wound up with, but the city of Harker Heights and the state of Texas might have more time than I did, so that was where she ought to focus her effort. She said I was being unfair and called my boss, which was fine by me. It blew my mind that a woman with a fully grown adult son in the army would think it was appropriate or healthy to call and talk to her son's commander about his multiple counts of misconduct and general failure to be an adult. But that, of course, is why he failed at being an adult in the first place. Teacher here. A friend of mine had a mum who came to lunch every day with her kid from kindergarten to, last I checked, 2nd grade. A little much, but the kicker is she used to spoon-feed him. This child had no issues, was completely capable of feeding himself, but she insisted on feeding him so she could monitor what he ate. A mother at a university parents' session explained how her son enjoyed reading before bed and would occasionally leave his light on. Being the considerate mother that she was, she didn't want to call to make sure he had turned his lights out, since that might wake him. She wanted to know if there was someone at the university that could check up on him every night. I love this. A lot of the others are over-the-top, blatant crazy, while this one is so wholesome and innocent, but also just so fricking unreasonable. It was me. I was 22 and had moved back from home a few months after my divorce, so I could save up enough money for an apartment. No credit, so it was $1,500 to move in. I went to visit an old friend 45 minutes away. She didn't use cell phones, so I told my mum I wouldn't be checking mine out of courtesy. But I would text when I got there and when I left. I got there, texted, and put my phone on silent. After a few hours, I got a bad feeling and checked my phone. My mum had checked the Find My Friends app, and it said I was in a drainage ditch. Funnily enough, it was right next to the restaurant we were eating at, because that app isn't always accurate, and said if I didn't call her, she'd call the police. I called her, and she had to hang up with the police to answer my call, because her adult daughter didn't answer the phone for a few hours after I'd warned her that I wouldn't. Had a really rich friend of a friend whose dad once picked him up in a helicopter. I run a huge book rental department for a good-sized university, 15,000 students. It's a beautiful program, 95% of our students' books are covered by one $85 fee. Anyway, I've seen some crazy stuff with parents. Honestly, there isn't enough space on Reddit for me to relay all the stories. My number one, however, is... It's move-in day, the worst day of the year, hundreds upon hundreds of students coming to get their books all at once. Most freshmen accompanied by their parents. This one lady marches up to the desk, pushing all other customers aside and dragging her mortified-looking son along by the hand. She then demands that I tell her how she get her son's books. I tell her the best way for your son to get his books is to use his class schedule and go find them himself, as he'll need to do this every semester moving forward. The aisles are alphabetical, and the courses arranged numerically once you find the right aisle. She tells me that she doesn't believe her son is capable of doing that. Now, at the time, I didn't expect to be staying as the manager of the department or employed by the university, so with nothing to lose, I said, "Then your son isn't capable of succeeding in college." And she lost it. Absolutely started flipping out, screaming that I called her son stupid. After her rage, I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're the one who suggested to me that your son is incapable of using the alphabet and numbers to perform a simple matching task. I was just going off the information you provided." She stared at me. "In other words, I'm pretty sure that you're the one who just called your son stupid when you told me that he's incapable of accomplishing a kindergarten-level skill." She throws another fit and then smashes the schedule into the kid's hand. He looks like he wants to die. She points off toward the shelves and tells him that she will be here if he needs her. Then she turns and glares at me with a "we'll see" look. I wish her a nice day and go back into my office and continue to observe the chaos of move-in day. Kid found his books in 5 minutes and tried to sneak out without her noticing. Sadly, her hover skill was greater than his sneak. She spotted him headed out the door and ran after him screaming his name. I worked at IT at my college, and the number of mums I got to tee off made my day. I would literally get hundreds of calls on big registration days or the first weeks of classes asking how they log into our system to check their sons' and daughters' grades. I would have to explain, you can't. And when they demanded me to give them their sons' or daughters' passwords so they could get in or reset the password, I would explain FERPA laws to them. Seriously, they just need to let their children learn on their own. If they make a mistake, they can learn from it.
Was a TA once. The best is, have you tried talking to your kids in the least snarky tone of voice you can muster? Your child is a legal adult now and has their own privacy. We can't violate it by giving away personal information. Have you tried asking your son or daughter about their grades or assignments?
I mean, personally, I can't think that they would change their methods if they got as far as their children going to college without coming in on some sort of effective communication strategy, but you never know. Good on you, TA. Was in court waiting to see the judge. Another case is going on about this high school senior hitting a kid with his car on campus. His mum goes up with him and the judge started asking questions and the mum answered them. The judge politely told her he'd like to hear from the son and she agreed. The boy started to explain what happened when she immediately cut him off, told him he was telling it wrong. She begins talking again and the judge, visibly annoyed now, asks her if she was there.
No, but I know what happened,
she assured him. When the judge told her multiple witnesses claim that's not what happened, she called them liars who were just out to attack her boy. She continued to argue with everything the judge said, until he finally had enough of this woman interrupting him and had her removed. Eventual friend in high school. His mother was there every day, all day. Was a private school, day student. She walked with him to class, rehearsal, music lessons, the fricking bathroom. Took the entire year to get her to stop, he ended up hiding from her. This kid was brilliant. Perfect SAT scores, accomplished musician, amazing actor. We gave him his first soda, gum, etc. Father was an ex-priest who screwed the organist. Mother was an ex-nun. Both were bat crap crazy. We were all so proud when he went to college 800 miles away. Then it went very bad. Originally, the story was that he took his own life, which made no sense. Everything was going his way. Had full scholarship, escaped his parents, and even more amazing, a beautiful girlfriend. He redefined awkward. His mother kept insisting it was murder, that the mafia had killed him, but nobody believed her in the slightest. Fast forward a few years and a few unrelated criminal investigations, and yeah, it was the Russian mob. Apparently his girlfriend's father took a strong dislike to him when he said something unforgivable. Again, he redefined awkward, and had him killed. Well, that got dark fast. I think that's the first legitimate time I've heard someone actually get killed by the mob. I know, right? Been years and the absurdity hasn't waned. I had a mother start emailing me 10 minutes after her son left a job interview with me, then start calling for 3 days straight along with 5 or so emails a day, talking up her son and how perfect he was, and this job is a perfect fit and she would make sure he'd be there every day. Then she starts with the rules I would have to follow, such as he can't stay more than 5 minutes after 6 because she has to make dinner, and since she'd be driving him to and from every day, he mustn't be late. Then she starts asking if I could direct deposit his checks into her account so she can help him manage his money, etc. All this was going on without an inkling that I would offer him the job. She was just making these demands for him up front because this job would have to work around her schedule. Needless to say, I didn't hire him. He was a good fit too, but not with that baggage. For about a year or so, I took my daughter to an anxiety clinic to help her deal with a phobia she had developed. A certain amount of the therapy involved parents, or whoever had bought the kid, working with the child. The rest of the time, the parents hung out, waiting for their kids to finish the rest of the session, where the kids went elsewhere. One kid, Robert, had general anxiety, more or less. He'd quite clearly gotten it from his mother, who was a bit of a basket case, and would do stuff like staying up all night redoing his homework so it would be done right. That poor kid. I'd arranged to play golf with a few mates when we were all around 18. One guy gets driven to the course by his mum, but rather than just being dropped off, she parked the car and decided to wait with us until it was our turn to tee off the first hole. And then she decides that she had better stay and walk with us for the entire 4+ hours of golf. A guy in the next group sees what's going on and intervenes, saying, "Hey lady, non-players are not permitted on the course, so you'd better just go home and let your son play golf with his buddies in peace." Oh, I bet that went over real well with her.
The real MVP.
Teachers and professors, what was the most insane paper that you ever had to grade? This was my history class. We'd just spent 2 weeks on World War II, and the kids were supposed to write a summary essay on the major events. This one kid genuinely believed that World War II lasted 2 days. The Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, and the next day America nuked Tokyo.
Well, duh. Why else would it be called World War II? Because it lasted 2 days.
Wait, so World War III will take up my entire weekend and then some? The Secretary of War?
Mr. President, the Germans just bombed Pearl Harbor.
President Donald F. Eisenreagan?
Nuke Tokyo. But sir, it was Germany. Exactly. They'll never expect it.
I'm an English teacher, but this was when I was a TA for Latin American Studies class. The final paper was to be a research project about any Central American, South American, or Caribbean country of the student's choosing. The topic was open, just had to be about something in one of these countries. One student turns in her first draft, the whole thing is about the country of Madagascar. When we told her it didn't fit the requirements of the assignment, she accused us of being too scared of the part where she discusses graveyards in Madagascar. In my high school Spanish class, we had to do presentations on Spanish-speaking countries so we could learn about their culture. Also in my class was a guy who was super obsessed with soccer, who after weeks of working on this project, gets up and gives a full presentation on Brazil. The second sentence out of his mouth was, "The national language is Portuguese," and he just gave a presentation on famous players. As he goes to sit down, another guy in my class just goes, "Nice presentation on a Spanish-speaking country, man." This was in my science class, year 8, so ages 12 through 13, fairly simple general science end-of-term test. The kid had clearly decided to heed the advice to attempt all questions as we didn't use negative marking, so for every answer he didn't know, he just wrote tubes. The best thing was that this included a question near the end of the paper that asked for a description of how blood was pumped around the body. I gave him half a mark.
Well, maybe he vaguely remembered someone mentioning tubes and figured it must be relevant to at least one of the questions.
It's sort of the equivalent of picking C for multiple choice. It's bound to be right some of the time. If that's an equivalent, it's a very loose one. Taking the same formula that might net you a 33% correct answer rate and instead using one component of God knows how many answers available in the field of science is truly a leap of faith. My parents graded GCSE papers every summer. One year, my mum got an English essay exam on which the kid had written, "I don't understand the question, so I'm going to write you a poem," followed by said poem and an elaborate drawing of a tropical island. He got a D. I teach chemistry, and my kids write one big paper as a write-up after a long lab. Anyway, I had this one student, let's call him Joe, who was a pain in my butt. Constantly late, disrespectful to his classmates and me, often just ditched so he was way behind. Anytime I'd call on him during his class, his answer would be hydrogen. We could be talking about molecular structure, I'd call on Joe to tell me how a transition metal like iron was structurally different from a halogen, and still that's what he'd shout. Fast forward to the end of the year and the long lab write-up. All the kids, including Joe, have done the lab. I give rubrics, clear guidelines on what to expect them to discuss, and a deadline. Deadline comes and they're all submitted through Google Classroom. I start reading, I'd made it through about 10 of them and they're okay. The kids give it a decent shot. Then I get to Joe's essay. He'd literally typed the sentence, "The answer is always hydrogen," hundreds of times. Enough to reach the page-length requirement, and he had done it with the correct headers for each section too. I was impressed with the amount of effort that had been put into screwing his grade away. Most of the kids in that class were sophomores in high school. If I remember correctly, he earned the 5 points for correct formatting, and that was it. So he scored 5 out of 100. Definitely didn't pass that paper. I also allow kids to redo work, and he never took me up on that. This truly is my time. I was a teacher in high school. I taught some lower achieving kids in an English class. They were around 14 to 16 years old. One kid, Paul, was particularly bad. Not through a lack of intelligence, but effort. Paul is also a native English speaker. This is important to remember. Paul did not submit his persuasive essay when it was due, and continued to fail to submit it for another month and a half. I kept reminding him, phoning home, emailing other staff, etc. Paul, who was the only pupil who didn't submit an essay, believed I was picking on him and singling him out. Finally, in what I can only imagine in a fit of sudden inspiration linked to his belief, I received the following unceremoniously submitted 400-word masterpiece. Is teacher bias? Perhap. Yes, he wrote perhap. It was all typed in a funky, bold, jagged font. Here is a brief summary and extract. Is teacher bias? Perhap. In my experience, teacher is very biased towards me for no reason. It went on about what he understood to be the faults in the teaching profession for most of it. However, another particular highlight was where he stated, "Teachers can be racist, as reports have found." He proceeded to never reference this or go into detail about racism or reports ever again. Paul was also white, just putting that out there. I still freaking have that essay. I once was in an English class with several papers that had to be peer-reviewed. One of my classmates wrote a 15-page paper that was, for the most part, barely comprehensible. But the real kicker was that she directly quoted Santa Claus 2. In a final paper for a college-level senior capstone, a real person quoted the 2002 Tim Allen Christmas comedy Santa Claus 2. We also had to discuss each other's papers in class afterwards. Awkward.
I genuinely laughed aloud at this. I have to know, what was the quote?
"Seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing." Well, it's weird they picked the second one because I'm pretty sure they say that in the first movie too. I had a student who wrote about the right to, quote, bear, spelt B-A-R-E, arms. For some of the paper, he was talking about concealed carry laws and he was for it. Then he started arguing against the Second Amendment. Then he started talking about women wearing short-sleeved shirts. This was a college-level class. I still have photos of this paper, though I've lost the original copy. It's glorious. I read it to all new friends. Geography teacher here. I teach 18-year-olds. I had assigned a scientific paper for about 5 pages long. Topic was chosen from among the chapter on space. Had a student write it on the subject of the moon. Went off on the good start, different theories of how the moon came into existence, then suddenly she switched into astrology. It was so smooth I didn't notice until a full paragraph in. I had to explain to her why she failed. One of my classmates once wrote and presented on this wacky jumble of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati. The paper was bad, but the presentation was awkward as frick. He was doing numerology on the chalkboard to demonstrate that the Pope was actually the Antichrist and that George Bush was one of his minions. It would have been funny, but I'm pretty sure he was schizophrenic. Everyone just got really, really quiet, including the professor. There was this girl who wrote about how the English language was only partially accessible to women. Not like that men had dominated the English language in terms of publishing or less censorship, but as in there are words and phrases that are 100% incomprehensible to women because of genetic differences between men and women. Did she have any explanations for why she thought this?
She couldn't because she's a woman.
There's actually a communication theory called muted group theory that basically proposes this premise. It suggests that because language was created by men, they have the upper hand in expressing themselves, and women are limited not only in their language, but their view of the world due to the language at their disposal. It also suggests that there are some experiences that are uniquely female that they are unable to express due to having a lack of vocabulary, since language was designed by men. I'm not a huge fan of this theory, and I'm not a critical scholar in the least, but it does exist and some people find merit in it. I was a creative writing English major, and for the most part we had to peer review our classmates' work. We had to provide positive criticisms. Early on, it became apparent that some people were majoring in creative writing because it was an easy A. I remember critiquing some papers, and the only positive thing that I could come up with was, "I like your punctuation." That made my teacher laugh out loud in class.
These quotation marks, how beautiful yet simplistic. They speak of your past, your future, how you live your life. Your entire being clearly went into these exceptional quotation marks.
A friend of mine took a creative writing class, and according to him, he had to peer review stories someone wrote about their persona, and also a Sword Art Online fanfic. I don't know if the same student wrote both.
Oof, I'm hit by secondhand embarrassment of that. I'd be way too shy or sensible to write about personas in college.
It's good to see that my classmates remember me this far along in life. The narrator is joking, by the way. I'd also like to inform you for the next story that I'm going to be saying the word congenital. I need you to mentally remove the con part of the words so that you can both understand the next part and get this past the YouTube censors. I had a student in freshman comp who was in her final research report based off the novel Frankenstein using the thesis, "Congenital manipulation of human beings in laboratories is wrong because God says so." No, that's not a typo, congenital manipulation. Apparently she had used find and replace because that was the way it was through the whole 8-page paper. She clearly meant genetic manipulation, but every single instance of the phrase genetic manipulation had been replaced with congenital manipulation. After I hauled myself out from under the desk of my office where I'd slid because I was crying with laughter, I really did read the paper. Apart from the crappy thesis, the paper had not had a single decent source, no real arguments, and the organization was chaotic at best. Worst part? I'd had multiple individual conferences throughout the semester with the students to work on thesis statement and developing arguments. She had never bothered to come to a single one and was teed off when I failed her. This one's priceless. I keep a whole file of such beauties from my student papers. And yes, I'm an English professor. Here's a couple. So You Want to Be President is a copulation of little thought about facts concerning the 41 American presidents. Wuthering Heights is a novel written in the Victorian era, but that excretes many of the symptoms of a romantic piece of literature. Children are at such a venerable young age. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was in a master's program for the last 2 years, and I had to peer review a classmate's paper. Holy crap. We were supposed to write a persuasive research essay on an effective way to make college more affordable. I was lucky enough to peer review a classmate and co-worker who already possessed not 1, but 2 master's degrees, and he was somehow on his way to a doctorate. I'm honestly still perplexed trying to figure out how he got those other 2 degrees. Anyways, the paper was littered with grammatical errors. My favorite of those was when he started making up words and talked about the problem of student indebtedness. He probably meant indebtedness, but he used it incorrectly multiple times, so make what you will of that. He also referred to the student debt problem as an extra layer on students' frustration cake. Yep, this person was a veteran, and at one point in the paper he talked about the terror events of 9/11/11. I understand that's a single number typo, but also if you're going to state that as your reason for joining the military, at least proofread it like you care about what happened that day. The good part, however, was his actual argument. For some reason, he was arguing that college should be more affordable, but only for veterans. You know, like what the GI Bill does. He said that we could make this happen by simply cutting the salaries of professors and giving that money back to the students. We're going to save colleges and universities in America by failing to pay our professors, everyone. Just the way he wrote indebtedness tells me how he's already had 2 masters. I worked with a nurse once who was horribly lazy and an all-round bad nurse and a miserable person. We looked her up online to see how she possibly managed to get through nursing school. We found her resume where she repeatedly referred to herself as a registered nurse. Then we asked another nurse we knew how she made it through school. They went to the same university. That nurse told us they tried to kick her out over and over, but she had threatened to sue them, like she did everybody at work. So yeah, a college education doesn't necessarily mean anything. Math teacher in our school graded an IB/SL math examination, and out of 90 marks on the test, she was able to award 1 mark. It wasn't for lack of trying either. Whoever wrote the exam tried a solid amount of the exam, except they literally didn't get anything but 1 question right. Current English professor. I can't think of a single worst, but here are some crazy ones in my Hall of Fame. Number 1. When I taught 8th grade, I had to insist that a photo of a koala bear off Google Images would not serve as a proper paper title. 2. Just a sad one. One student really slacked off on a paper with a fully MLA formatted first page, 2 sentences and an "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lancer." 3. The paper wasn't bad, but despite going over APA title pages at length in class, I had a student who turned in their APA paper with a teal and turquoise book-like MS Word cover template that was gaudy and had very little of the required info. 4. I can think of many where the writing was just poor or didn't have proper grammar, but one goof from a recent semester sticks out in terms of errors in writing. The student did a good poetic analysis of the poem "Because I Could Not Stop for Death," cited it correctly as by Emily Dickinson, yet all throughout the paper referred to the poet as Elizabeth Dickerson. Also, in one that doesn't at all count amongst my worst, but maybe one of my most memorable, I assigned a paper with the goal of arguing successfully for both sides, then mediating it as an advancement of lessons in argumentation. Most students chose from a list of very serious and difficult-to-solve problems, but one student requested to do a paper on the "Are hot dogs sandwiches?" debate. It was an impeccable paper that did reach a nice mediation, but it was also incredibly memorable among papers on substance epidemics and immigration questions. I was a chemistry TA, and a lot of the students would include silly details like how much they liked a lab partner in their first report of the year. One student took this to the next level by writing out a log of his whole day before doing the experiment. What he had for breakfast, the bus he took to class, how he was 3 minutes early. Everything. This was at the university level. I once had a student turn in a paper that was a little shy of the length requirement at a first glance, then I started reading it. It was the same several-paragraph original passage repeated over and over, sometimes with slight variations, for the whole length of the paper. Not a teacher, but I peer-reviewed the essay or short story of a classmate of mine in my junior year of high school. We were supposed to write about a historical event from the perspective of someone who was there. For example, I wrote about the perspective of a court stenographer in one of the McCarthy trials. This girl decided to write about the first Olympic Games, but seemed to have a basic lack of understanding of history. Her story, which again was about the first Olympic Games from the perspective of an athlete, involved texting, cars, and was absolutely laden with pop culture references. In addition to this, every I was lowercase, and the whole essay was center justified, because of course it was. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that part correctly, but I swear it was in Comic Sans or something like that. I didn't want to tell her that the entire story was terrible because I'm weak, so I just told her to check her capitals and punctuation and things like that. God, peer-reviewing someone's awful work is the worst. I don't know if it's necessary, but I always feel the need to tiptoe on direct issues like, oh, I don't think they actually had all that stuff back in 1896. I just want to tell them, I'm not trying to make any enemies, but your paper makes me want to commit Sudoku. I don't know if that last word was a typo or an intentional joke, but thank you, dear writer. Thank you very much. Now take the A- and get out of my sight. I'm studying to be an English teacher and had to do group peer reviews with classmates. One girl didn't have a thesis, didn't have any clear arguments, and had a 3-page paper that was 2 paragraphs long. The paper was supposed to be a proposal of how to fix an issue in higher education, and I couldn't even figure out what her problem was, and she had no proposal. The best part? After her and her friend went for the peer review, they left, leaving me and another girl to finish alone. When we got to the part to list feedback from our group, we both left clear comments about how our group left us. Not a professor, but I had to peer review a bit for my scientific writing course in my first year of college. It was a level 200 class, so there were a few sophomores and juniors. The way how it worked was that at the beginning of the semester, our professor had assigned us to do groups of 6. During the peer review sessions, she would staple the papers together according to group number and give it to different groups so we wouldn't grade our own group's papers. Around midterms, we had to write a mock proposal for a scientific field of our choice. Had to be at least 6 pages long with headings, abstracts, materials, hypothesis, etc. The one who wrote the best proposal got a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. I found one of the juniors' proposals and, oh my god. She only wrote 2 pages, had no discernible format, used a typewriter font, had no headings, and it was just her blabbering on about how herbal medicine helped her mental illness. There wasn't any real conclusion because from what I could tell, she didn't even have a hypothesis. There was so much wrong with the paper that I just moved on without writing anything. The real kicker is that she always promoted her self-published book on our class discussion board. I won the gift card, though. I'm not a teacher, but I've read a ton of people's essays trying to help them edit. Holy crap, have I read some stupid papers. Here's a few excerpts from an essay I tried to edit but had to give up on. The essay was supposed to be about how people can be greedy. I don't quite know. Title: The Greedy Money Sharks and Fair Fishers. What's the meaning of greed as a selfish desire for something for power, good, and wealth? ? I told him to define greed. Defining your terms is important and he'd get marked off if he didn't. 1 points me and the guys had a guys' night, which we have a great time just being guys. Unfortunately, on that night there was the guy who was our friend but now he's acquaintance because he activates his middle finger move. This one's just hilarious. Every time I try to read this aloud to my friends, I burst out laughing and can't finish the sentence. For example, my rich friend went on a date with a Canadian girl. What did my rich friend had a good time with his date? Then unlucky event happened, he went to the bathroom because of the reason that doesn't involve with ditching. My friend accidentally drops his wallet and he went to the bathroom. She grabs his wallet and left the restaurant. My friend came back surprised and realized he lost his wallet. In other words, he's broke as heck and washes the dishes instead of sending him to jail. Ever since that date, he never dates a Canadian person or travels to Canada because in his point that Canadians are thieves. Maybe his friend is just stupid. So group tells the guy to pay the full share. The man disagrees, then he ran out of chills. And never seen again only until tomorrow. Never seen again? But then they saw him the next day. Although the tactic of avoiding paying the bill, full stop. Another way is to enhance their beauty within their appearance. For example, my cosplayer friend, redacted. A cosplayer is a person who dresses up as the character related to anime, cartoon, or video games. She always looks elegant and beautiful outfit of a character she cosplays as. When she wears her normal clothes, she still looks cute and natural. One night we get our boba drinks from a shop called Redacted, so I and Redacted ordered our drinks. I looked at her, she looks happy in a pretty way, then glanced at me. My cheeks started to get red. So I told her that I would pay for our drinks. I asked her why she has to look cute. She replied, "It's to make guys pay for my stuff and someone who I'd like." I kind of felt angry that she used me, but I was curious about the person who she liked. On the way to Redacted's house, I asked her, "So who do you like?" When we arrived at her house, she turns around and went to me, then pushed her smooth lips to my lips. Redacted steps back and replied, "I love you, baka." Baka means in Japanese is a fool. For example, people always take advantage of their men related to money. The woman's point of view of men are personal money spenders, and some men's point of view towards people is some kind of powerful god or someone in royalty. My thought on this subject are slavery and women being cheap. That be another way to avoid paying is taking advantage of your date and act like you're a spoiled royal brat. A woman who would do that, which is my mother because she doesn't work but take care of my sister but her husband does all the work. The worst part of my mother that she begs for money from me because I'm her child. He doesn't have a job and all of his money comes from his parents. This was written by a freshman in college. For a lesson one time, we were supposed to grade some AP tests to get an idea of what the test would be like. The prompt was like, "Tell about an achievement you've made," or something. I received a paper that went something like this. Growing up, I loved basketball. I would play it all the time. I really enjoyed the game, and I still play it now. I play basketball during the day. Sometimes I play basketball during the night too. Basketball is fun to play. Just on and on. About 100 different ways to say they play basketball. Anyways, I gave it a 2, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, only due to the fact that it had no grammatical errors. Turns out the person received a frickin' 4. Taught at community college. Last paper for English 102 was an argument paper. I stated on the directions no stupid arguments like the Holocaust or the latest school shooting didn't happen. Student turns in a paper denying the school shooting that Alex Jones was recently in court for also denying. Gave her a 55%, which was an F, which put her final grade at an F because of a whole bunch of other crap the nut did and didn't do in class. One of the sentences was something along the lines of, "Who can blame the crisis actors for doing what they did? Every person just tries to help themselves." My time has come. I teach 10th grade English. One girl wrote the world's worst paper. It was incoherent, 5 pages long, had no claim, and was mostly plot summary. It was unreadable. I hated every second of it. I didn't know how to grade it, so I handed it to my co-teacher and was like, "You deal with this mess." He gave her a 55, which was generous. "So this is a failing paper, right?" We handed it back. I thought it was over. A different student turned in a paper, like a week late. I started grading the paper, I reached the second page, and I had this horrible epiphany. It was the same horrible paper. I couldn't compare the two papers because I didn't have the original, but it was the same unreadable garbage. I stopped reading, gave the second version a 45, and moved on. Then, an entirely different student who is not friends with either of the original students turned in a paper. It was like 2 weeks late, but I agreed to grade it. I got halfway through the first sentence before I realized it was the same gosh darn horrible paper. I almost died. These were all handwritten, so each student rewrote by hand all 5 pages of garbage. I know they were all copied because they had the same weird spelling errors. I have no idea why any of them thought distributing and copying a paper that had already failed would work. So I had to reread the exact same piece of garbage paper 3 times and it was so unpleasant. What was your cringiest encounter with a nice guy? Met a nice guy over OKC a couple of years ago. I gave him my number after we chatted for a bit and talked about possibly meeting. When he suggested we meet at a local elementary school in the middle of the night, I noped the frick out and told him it was nice talking to him, but I didn't really want to meet anymore. He kept trying to convince me by saying he would buy me gifts. He really likes me and thinks we could hit it off. When I told him no, he blew up and called me the B word. A whore, the usual. He tells me that I now owe him $15 because he'd already bought me a present for our first date and that I needed to meet him right now to give him his money. Or I could meet with him and have a good time and forget about all of this. Blocked his number right away and didn't hear from him until the next day when he calls me from a different number. When I picked up, he acted pleasant and asked me what time we were going to meet today for our date. I told him to F off and blocked him again. Then I get a text a couple of hours later from another fricking phone number saying that if I don't meet him, he was going to take his own life. After a bit of unnecessarily dramatic conversation, I basically told him that I didn't care if he did that, he was psychotic and needed to leave me alone. I blocked him and forgot about it. Fast forward to about 6 months ago when I get a text from an unknown number. I knew exactly who it was when I read the text. "I have $20 and a fun night planned for us. Want to meet sometime soon? Miss you." Blocked it, changed my number, never giving it out to a stranger again. There was a guy in high school who had a crush on me. He was never shy about it, and from day one he made me really uncomfortable. He had asked me out multiple times a day, always in front of my friends, who didn't help because they'd always egg me on to go out with him. I was the new kid in school and they'd all been friends with him since elementary. When I kept saying no, he assumed it was because I was seeing someone else, so he started telling people that I was sleeping with random guys at school. I wasn't. I had no interest in dating any of the boys I went to school with. Anytime I tried to tell him to stop doing that, he, and anyone else around for that matter, said he was just joking and needed to lighten up. It all came to a head at the homecoming dance my junior year. He was a senior, so it was his last homecoming. Apparently, the day before homecoming, he told one of my friends that he'd asked me out to the dance and I'd said yes. He had not asked me, I never had any intention of going to the dance. He kept going on to my friend about how special he wanted it to be, that he spent all of his money on tickets, gas, new shoes, and a corsage. My friend was so excited for him that she went over to his house the day of homecoming and helped him get everything ready. She also told all of our friends what was going on, so everyone was under the impression I was going to the dance with him. Let me also add, no one checked with me that I was going to the dance, so this was all going on without my knowledge. He told everyone that I was going to get dropped off by my parents, so he and all of my friends waited outside for me. They waited for 3 hours. Apparently, anytime my friends told him to come inside and that I wasn't coming, he'd start tearing up and say, "Just 5 more minutes." So of course, I went to show up to school on Monday and everyone was furious at me. None of my friends wanted to talk to me. I sat alone at lunch for 3 days completely confused about what was going on before some girl I'd never talked to before asked me why I'd stood him up. So I went up to the guy when he was alone, asked what the frick he had done, and he just started laughing hysterically and said, "If you agree to go out with me, I'll tell everyone it was just a misunderstanding." Never talked to the guy again. It permanently damaged my friendships with several people because they thought I was a massive piece of crap to this guy who they thought was really sweet. Holy God, what a manipulative moron. There's just so much premeditated destruction of the girl's social life on display that he deserves whatever badness life throws his way. I had to get a ride from a friend my junior year of high school. For some reason, I didn't have my car. I don't remember all the details. He stopped about a mile from my house and pulled over into the side of the road. He had told me he had had a dream where we had made out and that I was a really good kisser in it, and he decided I could either walk home from there or kiss him. Holy crap, do I have a story for this. So I'm a big dude, and at my first semester at university, I came in as a junior. And there was this guy that was just way too freaking into me, and he was super creepy about it. The dude would just sit uncomfortably close to me, like if I was sitting on a chair, he'd sit on the armrest, or if I was talking to someone, he'd place himself directly between me and the person I was talking to. It was annoying. He would always bring up discussions to make sure everyone in the room knew he was bi, and ask everyone their orientation, and every dude would answer straight and he'd awkwardly flirt with me or some other dude. After months of this, we were playing ping pong and we were getting in a stupid argument where he was just flat out wrong. It had something to do with game engines and pixel art. It was stupid. He would hate to admit he was wrong, but he decided that this was a good point to show me he was able to accept defeat in an argument. He goes, "Fred, I have Asperger's. It's really hard for me to look someone in the eye. I can only do it if I'm really mad at the person or if I really want to screw them. But don't worry, I'm not mad at you." All while staring right into my face. I just put my stuff down and walked away. I was like 19 and working my third shift at a gas station, casually sweeping the floor. The door opens and I hear that ding, so I look up and make eye contact with some guy. I can't explain what was going on in the guy's head, but it was like he thought it was some kind of slow-mo movie situation and he staggered back, gasping, and widening his eyes and staring at me. I'm not the kind of person to notice this kind of stuff in other people. I felt like I was reading a scene from Twilight in my head. I went behind the checkout counter, he grabbed his Red Bull or whatever, he kept obviously looking at me in shock and shaking his head like he was trying to psych himself up for something. Ladies, you know that feeling when you know someone wants to catch your attention and talk to you, but you're trying to keep it casual? This went on for like 20 minutes and I couldn't accomplish anything because I'm waiting for this dude to check out. Anyway, so he walks up to the checkout super dramatically. I check him out. He stares the whole time and finally says, "I never expected to see such a beautiful woman at a gas station. This is fate. You shouldn't be working here. I just can't help myself. I have to ask you to go out with me." I said, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He seriously looked enraged. He clenched his fists and gave me this overly dramatic, scary look, grabbed his stuff and stormed out the door. He moved his car so the bright headlights were facing the front of the store and sat there until the next customer came, probably an hour later. Honestly, I wasn't too scared. It was just really like, what? I just wanted to finish my list of duties at this crappy gas station and live my life. But some Joe concocted a bizarre dream scenario in his head and somehow that was my fault. Gotta love the sheer stupidity of thinking both that you're way too pretty to be there, but then being shocked and enraged that you could possibly have a boyfriend. What a nutcase. A guy sat down next to me at a coffee shop and asked why I didn't have a boyfriend. That was his opening line, so I told him I did, and he immediately looked appalled, demanding to know where he was, and I was like, "Bro, do I need to wear a sign or something?" Nice guy said he was doing me a favor by trying to stick his hands down my pants because he was the only one that would give me experience, being the size that I was. Joke's on him. I lost 65 pounds after that and turned my life around completely. Had a very difficult, traumatic end to a long-term live-in engagement. He went to jail, I decided to go to Europe to backpack for the summer. Best friend, male, agreed to come along and was very aware that this was a post-breakup getaway to clear my head and have fun. He flew out ahead of me to visit family. I arrived at the airport to see him waiting for me in Europe on bended knee, ring, flowers and all. I was furious and that friendship was destroyed. Vacation was equal parts horrendously awkward and tense and amazing, but ended with him drunkenly ranting about it all in a hostel one night, ultimately becoming inappropriate and then physically aggressive toward me, and a group of strange hostel bunkies helping to quietly pack my stuff while he was finally passed out and get me to the airport and home immediately. I haven't seen him since, about 8 years now. I guess in his mind it was the perfect cliché movie moment to begin our lives together. He had 10 years to speak up, but felt that the very first moment I step on European soil to begin my newfound freedom and let go of it all was the absolute best moment to inform me that he had lied essentially about our platonic friendship for a decade and wanted an immediate transition to being lifelong partners, right then and there. My stomach is churning even now thinking about it, and of course people gathered around and cheered. I believe that's what it was that infuriated me the most. It's humiliating to be put on the spot like that in front of so many strangers, expecting and hoping to witness a fairy tale moment. I had to loudly say something like, "Come on, stand up, you're joking right, brother friend. Quit playing around, let's go celebrate my 7-year-long relationship ending last week, and go party my freedom now. Ha 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 ha." Of course, I'm the bad girl in that situation, and he's just cliché hopelessly in love best friend, good guy, finishing last as always. Someone even booed me. Met a guy at a gathering at a mutual friend's place and ended up getting stuck talking to him all night. Night ends and I don't give it another thought. Couple of weeks later, he calls my house. I didn't give him my last name or my phone number. Since he now has my number, he also knows my address and starts showing up at my house at weird times, sometimes with his equally creepy sister. Fast forward a few years and I haven't lived at home for at least a year. He shows up, Dad answers the door and just tells him I'm not in, not that I don't live there or anything. Later that same night, Dad lets the dog out for a pee before bed. Dog disappears into the backyard, chasing something he really wants to catch. Thinks it's a skunk or something until he hears the gate on the neighbor's fence open and close quickly. Dog has chased a person out of the backyard. My old bedroom window faced our backyard. We don't know for sure, but I think my dog chased that frickin' creep out of our yard. Screw you, Adam. I don't think we have a catch-all name for these so-called nice guys of the world in the same way that we have Chad for D-bags and bold players. But yeah, for the purpose of addressing all the nice guys in this collection, screw all of you, Adams. Drinking too much on the first date in order to stay over at my apartment and sleep on my couch, and then try to worm into my bed at 3 a.m. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I knew this kid in 9th grade who seemed like a nice enough dude. Let's call him Frank. We became friends over our mutual love of video games, with him seeming to be a lot more invested in the friendship, but like I said, he seemed harmless. One day, I invite him over to the house to play games on my PlayStation. We have a good enough time, him continuously talking about how he's so happy to have a friend who likes video games and is a girl. Red flag, I know. I got to school the next day, and during class, my friends tell me that Frank went and bragged to anyone that would hear that I invited him over and that he heard I was super easy and bought a condom. Just in case. Being an angry and petty teenager, I walk up to him during lunch period in front of a bunch of guys and called him out for what he said. He began stuttering, but before he could finish, I told him he was a creep and to never talk to me again. Cut to a few months later, and I'm called into the vice principal's office. I get there and she asked me if I was friends with Frank, and I responded that we used to be. She asked what ended our friendship, and I explained the situation to her. She looks at me and says, "That's not what he told us, but I think I know who's telling the truth." Turns out that after I ended the friendship, Frank fixated on another girl only to discover that she had a boyfriend. Frank decided the best course of action was to get rid of the boyfriend by pulling a knife on the kid in the hallway and threatening him. Security, of course, gets him and discovers that he only had a butter knife. Still, he threatened someone, so he was called into the principal's office. Whereupon, he explained that the only reason he pulled the knife on this guy was because he was so heartbroken after I dumped him following our 6-month anniversary, and fell in love with this other girl because she treated him right. He got suspended, but since it was close to the end of the school year, he just never came back and transferred schools the following school year. Good riddance. I considered him a friend. Stayed at his apartment when visiting his town. He slept in the living room, I in the bedroom. When it got late, he started making jokes about how he had hidden the bedroom key and that I should get ready for him. I spent the night half awake and fully dressed from sheer fear. In the morning, I packed and wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let me go without having a goodbye kiss. He physically blocked the door so I couldn't get out. I tried to play it off and somehow managed to squeeze by him without getting kissed, but it was a terrifying experience. And that was the end of our friendship. I've got a weird one. A good buddy of mine was moving across the country. I'd known him for a while and he was very gay. And I'm not, but we were still pretty close friends. He had his going-away party at a very gay bar here in Austin. No big, I'm comfortable with my heterosexuality. I'll go and have a few drinks and dance a little and go home with my girlfriend, who went to the party with me. Well, we get there and about 20 minutes in, she gets a text that her friend's sister has been in a bad car accident. She leaves to go help her friend. I decide I'll stay for another hour or so before heading home. I'm at the bar having a drink and I start to feel tired, so I'm going to go outside and call an Uber. As I'm outside, one guy from the party group, but who I didn't know at all, asked what was going on, and I told him I was leaving. He was like, "Dude, I live right by you, I'll drop you off." I didn't think about it at the time, but he would have no clue where I lived because we had barely been introduced at the party. I get in his car and as we turn the corner he puts his hand on my leg. I kinda snap out of it and say, "You know what, man? I'm uncomfortable here, why don't you let me out of the car?" I get the whole, "Nah bro, I'll get you home safe, it's fine. I won't stop." Doesn't pull over, comes up to a stoplight, I try to force open the door and the door won't open. He won't look at me and by this point I'm saying very forcibly to let me go. I normally conceal carry, but not this night since I was in a bar, and I was drinking, both illegal to carry a gun while doing so. After a few more lights and silence where I realize that he's taking me somewhere against my will, I realize that I have a window breaker on my keychain. It's one of those combo thingies that can cut a seatbelt and break a window if your car is underwater. So I pull it and immediately break the passenger side window at the next light and start crawling out. Luckily, there were like 8 people that saw it happen and came running over. He still wouldn't unlock the door. When he saw them running over to help, he opened the door and pushed me out and sped off. He was in a stolen car and no one knew him at the party. He had just started associating with our group early on and I thought he was part of the party. It was scary as heck. I worked for a few years at a children's museum. There was this single dad with 3 daughters who was cute but way too old for me, especially at the time when I was 19 and he was about 35. I also got a weird vibe from him, but he was always very nice, if a little uncomfortable. His daughters were adorable. The following events happened over a 6-month period. One day, some guest approaches me and asks if I've seen this missed connections on Craigslist about the museum. It was about me. The guy was writing about things we'd talked about and was saying how good we would be together, etc. Thinking back, I honestly think that she must have been friends with the guy, because it was too weird that she approached me out of all the other workers and then asked me what I thought about the guy who wrote the ad. Later, he found me on Facebook and tried to add me. I didn't add him, and the next time he was in the museum, he followed me room to room and just glared at me from afar, not talking to me. Super uncomfortable. I thought it would be easier to just add him, so I did. Then he starts commenting really weird and creepy stuff on my photos, like a gif of Pikachu biting his lip or just fap 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 fap. So I decided enough is enough and deleted him. Then he tries to win me back or something. He brings a wrapped canvas to the museum and gives it to my boss, saying it would be too weird to just give it to me. And my boss calls me down later and makes me open it in front of everyone. It was a very fun workplace and we loved to rip on each other. And it was a painting of one of my photos on Facebook. I was so mortified I put it away, but one of my coworkers, and also my best friend, replaced the clock in the bathroom with my portrait because she's a dick. While it was funny, I also asked my boss to watch out for him, so from then on I didn't see him anymore and blocked him on Facebook. So I think I'm safe. My nice guy said he'd take his own life unless I became his girlfriend. Nice guy from college, we're talking about trench coat and fedora, fingerless gloves, pathetically sleazy smile, the whole shebang, in a tropical country at that, who kept trying to talk to me even as I was clearly trying to do my homework. Now, I was okay with multitasking, I could really do homework and listen and respond to him, but he wouldn't have it. Hey, you know what? I really hate it when women, yes, not people, women, specifically, ignore me. I was dumbfounded but also really offended, so I shot back that I was listening to him even if I wasn't looking at him. No, but when I'm talking to someone, I want them to look at me. Friend overhears this and went off on him faster than I did. He left me alone after that. Not as terrible as the other answers here, but that was my first real taste of it. As usual with the darker and more negative subjects that we post here sometimes, I find myself grasping for literally anything to be positive about. So well done to your friend for giving Creepo McFedora a piece of their mind. Stick by those friends. A coworker gave me a ride to the train station because I'd missed my bus when I was a trainee. It's a 10 to 15 minute ride and I thought it was nice of him, but I didn't think much of it. I thought he was just helping out. When we were still in the car, he then mentioned wanting to invite me for a drink one day, then offered to drive me all the way back home. He was living near the train station we were heading to, and it would have made a 45-minute drive to get to my place. I declined because I felt uncomfortable, and because without traffic the train was actually more convenient for me. He mistaked my refusal for politeness or just outright ignored it and insisted, saying it wasn't bothering him to drive all the way here. At this point, I didn't care about him. I was just starting to get scared. He insisted, and I had to argue and practically begged him to just drop me at the train station, finally mentioning that my dad was waiting for me anyway at the terminus, and pretended we could have a drink someday, and he let it go. But it all happened as we were driving onto the highway, so I felt trapped and it was really uncomfortable. Thankfully, it was my last week here, and I avoided him the last few days that I worked. He let me sleep over because I lived an hour away and we'd been drinking, and he pulls the old, "You're really lucky I'm a nice guy. Most guys would force themselves on you right now, but I don't because I'm nice. You're really lucky," despite us having been normal platonic friends for a few months before this, and me having established a few times that I wasn't interested in anything else with him. I was on a Discord server and spoke in a voice chat frequently. One time this dude came in and didn't speak, only in text chat. He kept putting himself down for attention, so I told him that he shouldn't worry, blah blah blah, just to be polite and to try to get him to stop. This went on for quite a bit, and I think he might have taken that politeness as something more. I'd already told most people on the server that I don't swing that way, and he got all down about it and literally complained to everyone on the server that he had a crush on her, but she hates me. Fast forward an hour or so, and he PMs me saying that it's actually me he likes. I told him that I didn't like him back and that I was gay, but he threatened to take his own life, so I told him to stop being so manipulative and to pull himself together. I was at a bar and coffee shop drinking tea when this guy, a friend of a friend, came and sat down next to me with 2 shots of whiskey. I told him no thank you, I'm not drinking, and he said, "Wow, you're really making me angry. I'm being fricking nice to you and you're being really fricking rude." I said no thank you again. He kept going off about how rude I was and what a nice guy he was. Finally, I told him that I'd take the shot and throw it in his eyes if he didn't walk away. He walked away finally. Prick. Nice guy asks me out in high school on the bus and I declined. He gives me the silent treatment after that. The next day he appears in my friend group with his arms encasing one of my friends who looked clearly uncomfortable. He tells her he loves her and how great of a woman she is to be giving him a chance to treat her like a princess. I talked to her after, and he had asked her over and over to date him until she said yes. She was a very nice girl and I felt bad for her. I told her what happened and that seemed to give her the confidence to stop the dating after only a few hours. We never saw him much after that, thank goodness. What Valentine's Day disasters have you witnessed? I served at a Japanese hibachi restaurant and once had a couple come and the dude dumps her after the meal. She then gets up and throws up a trail probably a good 20 feet as she runs to the bathroom. The dude got up and left the girl, and I was left to clean the mess. I blew my car's tire and my friend came in to bail me out. We're both straight dudes and forgot it was Valentine's. Decided to have dinner, and both were coming from important meetings, so had suits on. We didn't catch on until the end and how the entire waitstaff thought we were just the cutest gay couple. I 100% went to lunch with my best friend on V-Day years ago because we were both single and the staff thought we were dating. This is hilarious. There was a note in our reservations that it was an engagement. They wanted champagne, a specific seat, a bunch of other stuff. The server comes up to the table with something like, "So I read we're celebrating an engagement. Congratulations." Confusion from the woman, glaring from the guy. He hadn't proposed yet. The server had ruined it. These two were on a date and the guy went to go use the bathroom. The girl just up and leaves after he went to the restroom. When the guy came back, he sat around for a while until asking his waitress where she went. She replied with saying she left. The guy then asked the waitress if she would go on a date with him. The waitress said no. 0 for 2 in one night. Damn. In my adult club bouncer days, we had one of our regulars get suited up and bring flowers in one V-Day to try and woo one of the exotic dancers. It didn't work. Pro tip, if every time you all hang out involves you giving her money, she's not into you. He proposed, she said no. He cried and tried to change her mind for 20 minutes while she sat there stony-faced. She finally got up and walked out. He paid and left in tears. I waited at a Section 1 V-Day that had a marriage proposal, a 40th anniversary, and a breakup all at the same time. The breakup was the worst. The guy brought his high-class date a gift, a mini ceramic bear holding balloons. He presented it when I was at the table and she looked at it like it was a hot turd. I just knew this was not going to end well. She left at the end of the meal and must have said something because he stayed at the table for another 40 minutes, head down and crying. I felt bad. He saw the celebrations going on at the other tables. Sweet God, the two worst days of the year I've had to work as a waiter were Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. Both were difficult enough without a distraught, crying, newly single blocking off one of your tables on the busiest day of the year. I worked at a pretty high-end Mediterranean bistro. My second Valentine's there, it was probably the busiest night I've ever worked as a server. We had reservations that booked basically the entire restaurant, including the bar and patio, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. No walk-ins were to be seated unless a reservation was cancelled or someone with a reservation didn't show up. Most of the customers were pretty understanding and either waited or simply left. One dude, however, kept pushing and asking every 10 minutes how much longer until he's seated, constantly saying he's a regular customer and how his date is going to be there at 7. He got there at 6. We insisted that once a table was available and all the customers before him were seated, he'd get a table, but because of the amount of reservations, we couldn't guarantee he would even get a table at all. At about 6:50, the guy loses it, fast walks up to the hostess stand where the reservation book is, grabs the reservation book and practically runs out the front door. Now, everything is going to complete crap because the only copy of the reservations for the night that is barely half over is gone. Two of the owners ran outside to follow the guy and try and get the book back, but by the time they get out, he had already left the parking lot. Even better is, 2 hours later, chaos is still running rampant, and the dude shows back up saying he has a reservation for 2. 3 of the 5 owners, all brothers, escorted the dude and his date out to the parking lot and banned him from the restaurant permanently. They even took a picture of him and posted it in the window saying, "Do not serve this man." In conclusion, salty dude without a reservation steals reservation book and then tries to come back later. Also, if anyone wants to use this for a sitcom, feel free. Just let me reprise my role as the waiter and we can call it even. I used to work front desk at a hotel. One Valentine's Day I was working the night shift and this woman comes down with a cut above her eyebrow, looking like she just went a few rounds in the ring with a boxer. Woman starts sobbing and asks us to call the cops, which we do immediately. Turns out this girl's boyfriend had just beat the crap out of her during a fight, and from what I could tell, this probably wasn't the first time. So after the cops show up and haul the dude off, my manager offers her a different room on comp, as we need to leave the guy's stuff where it is for him to pick up the next day. She accepts and I go up with the woman to help her collect her stuff and move to the new room. There were a bunch of bottles of alcohol in the room, and she donated them to the front desk staff. I got a bottle of Hypnotic and some vodka. Manager got a bottle of Patron. Cherry on top of everything, the dude's wife called later that night saying someone had stolen his card as he was out of town on a business trip. Never one to defend an abuser, I told her where she could find her husband. Fun times. Thanks for telling the wife. My mother has been cheated on and the hotel staff wasn't able to tell her anything. I understand why they're not able to, but thank you for doing that for a stranger. I was a delivery driver for a fruit bouquet company and I had 2 arrangements from the same guy. Routes were made for me and the truck was loaded so there was no way I could mess this up. Delivered both arrangements to the appropriate address. I headed back to the store to find the store owner and the guy who sent these in an argument. This idiot put the wrong name to the houses. And it was on the card with the arrangement, along with the phone numbers. So both women called each other and then called the guy. He tried to say it was my fault. Then the person who took the order, he'd ordered it online. All we did was import the order. I hate Valentine's Day because of that place, but man, that was a great moment. I was a pastry chef at this big resort in Cape Cod. We got a special order from this guy who was coming in for his anniversary, Valentine's Day. He wanted his dessert to have "Will you marry me" written on it so he could pop the question when it came out. He called ahead to the front and back kitchen, even came in himself that morning to make sure it was good to go. The whole crew was behind him. We had cooks all night coming in to ask if it had happened yet. I wrote the inscription on the plate and dressed it to the nines with gold leaf and expensive chocolate. I'm taking a picture of the plate just before it's sent to go out and notice our head waiter come in with a weird look on his face. He says plainly, "They don't need it." She had broken up with him before the entrees hit the table. A guy did a backflip and asked a girl to be his Valentine. She declined. I walked up to him and asked if he was okay. He said it had taken him a week to perfect it. I was eating in a fine dining establishment, Chili's, several years ago. In the next booth was a really young guy who had a big bunch of roses on the seat next to him. He kept looking at his watch, looking at the roses, popping open a ring box for a peek at the ring. He did this for half an hour or so, then began calling and texting someone, presumably his girlfriend, over and over. As we were waiting for our check, he hands my wife the roses, mumbled something, and walked out. Poor guy. To clarify, I don't actually consider Chili's a fine dining experience. My wife and I had done some shopping and stopped off for a burger and beer afterward. Walking back to my dorm room once, a guy was carrying roses. I think this was around Valentine's Day, I don't remember, and he handed one to me. Made my day because it had been a crappy long day, but I wonder what kind of day he had been having to be handing out roses to strangers. A guy proposed to his girlfriend at my restaurant and she said no. The guy threw up his arms and ran out of the building. Later, while waiting for someone to pick her up, she told us it was completely out of the blue because they'd only been dating for a few months. Another V-Day, a guy raised a huge fuss over the fact that we wouldn't serve liquor to his underage girlfriend. I'm certain you mean he threw up his hands momentarily in exasperation, but I can't help picturing him running out of the restaurant, arms straight up Kermit the Frog style. I mean, I certainly would remember it more if the man went full Muppet, but I suppose real life will never be that magical. Let's break up the cringe with a genuinely heartwarming story that had no business being in this thread. Older woman, probably in her upper 90s, with her teenaged grandson at a semi-classy restaurant. She was dressed to the nines and the grandson was in a nice button-up and dress slacks. As they got seated at their table, the grandson placed a framed photo of what my friend assumed was the boy's grandfather and husband of the older woman. Found out it would have been their 70th wedding anniversary, but he had passed suddenly but peacefully a few months back. The grandfather had always wanted to take her to a nice restaurant but never had the time or money to do it. So the grandson saved up his pay from the last couple of months and even got some donations from other relatives and took her to the restaurant. They ate dinner remembering all the good times with this man. They had my friend to take a picture and she did. They tipped my friend very well. By happenstance, my friend ran into the young man some weeks later to find out the grandmother passed away a few days after that night, peacefully in her sleep, holding a photo of her beloved husband. He was so happy he could make that night special for her. Said it was the only day he saw her smile since his grandfather had passed away. He got the picture they took to the restaurant printed in wallet-sized and carried it around with him in his wallet. At my diner, an old man proposed to an old woman. He tried to get off the chair to kneel, tripped and fell, and I assume broke something since he couldn't get back up and we had to call him an ambulance. My manager had to drive her teeth to the hospital, separately because she had taken them out to eat her soup, Lord knows why, and left them on the table in the confusion. I don't know if she said yes, my manager didn't get to see them at the hospital, only pass on her teeth to the nurse. Busboy on a Las Vegas diner. An attempted proposal. Dude tries to set up sign with girlfriend's friends for her to show up and see the ring near a fountain. Duck stole the ring, they found it 2 hours later as he dropped it in the fountain. She still said yes though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. 16 years in hospitality gives you some good stories. The most awkward? My first job as a waitress, a guy wanted to propose to his girlfriend. He came in 2 months before to book and had everything figured out. He planned to pop the question during dessert. We had champagne, balloons, and sparklers prepped for the big moment. The time comes, he drops to one knee, gives a speech about his love for her. He asks, and she says no, puts the ring in her bag, finishes her dessert, and leaves. Quite possibly the most awkward thing I've had to witness, alongside around 200 other people. The manager gave him everything for free, he felt that bad for him. Cringed up inside every time I saw him after that. The most effed up, I was working as a duty manager and one of the tills kept dropping off the network. As I was trying to fix it, I could clearly hear the conversation of the table by the waiter's station. It started out sweet enough with her excitedly telling him she was pregnant. He went quiet and didn't say anything for a bit and then asked her what the plan was. She said she was keeping the baby. He said he didn't want kids and had told her this. She had got upset and said he thought he'd be happy and change his mind when he found out. By this point, I fixed the till, but I'm unable to step away from this car crash. Turns out she had stopped taking the pill without telling him, thinking she could turn him around. He said he knew she could be a little bit nuts sometimes, but this was the next level. He told her it was over and she could send someone to collect her things as he wanted nothing more to do with her. He called me over to pay the bill and just left. The guy never even shouted, he just calmly went, "F this," and noped out of there. I couldn't even look her in the eye, just left to give her her own time. The funniest was managing a hotel room service where there was a Valentine's package that included getting each course of the special menu delivered to your room. More than a few couples thought it was a good idea to call for the next course and then start doing the deed. Having to help with deliveries as reception screwed up the bookings, I had the privilege of people answering the door in the buff, seeing adult fun toys strewn around, and one where the other members of the ménage à trois were carrying on in the background. After complaints of similar instances from my team, I had to take action. I ended up having to call the offending guests and tell them if they could not respect my team by answering the door in at least a closed dressing gown, they could come down and collect the rest of their meal from the restaurant. Bonus from the same night, had to call an ambulance for a woman with a dislocated shoulder. The guy admitted that they were trying to recreate a particular kind of scene in the shower using the conditioner as, the splooge. He slipped in the conditioner and fell on her. Back when I served food at one of those super touristy seafood restaurants, I worked a Valentine's Day double shift. For lunch, this younger couple came in celebrating their 1-year anniversary. I offer my congratulations and then proceed to do my usual spiel before taking orders. The girl is looking more and more dismayed the longer I talk. Finally, I get to the end and ask if there's any allergies. She looks at her boyfriend and says, "Yes, I'm allergic to fish and shellfish." Then looks over at me, very sad. I made sure every aspect of her meal was fine for her, but it was that look of, "We've been dating a year and he still takes me to a restaurant that could kill me," that really did it for me. Not a table I was serving, but back in my Olive Garden days, we had a man who looked to be in his mid-20s tap his empty wine glass with a fork to call for attention of the surrounding strangers, then get down on one knee with a silver band in hand and ask his girlfriend to accept his promise ring. She looked horrified start to finish.
Did she accept the promise ring though?
Oh, hell no. They went outside to talk and she came back in to settle the bill without him. In college, I waited tables, and Valentine's was always a good one in terms of tips. I once saw a couple come in to eat. Halfway through the dinner, the man's wife showed up to surprise the couple. The wife took the wine bottle and poured the remnants over her husband's head, took off her ring and told the girlfriend she could have him. He tipped me $100.
You gotta think that your wife might think something's up when you're busy on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, this guy doesn't seem to be the brightest bulb in the chandelier. Had a man and a woman sharing dessert and the man playfully put a bit of ice cream on her nose. She then did the same and he did it back once more, but with a different flavor of ice cream. She then flipped out at him because,
"You know I like chocolate the most. Why would you waste it, you idiot?"
In the end, she stormed out because the man couldn't comprehend how much she was blowing up the situation. I would imagine the gentleman in question had the shocked Pikachu expression on his face for several seconds before chasing his partner out. I know I would have. I was the manager of a wings and pizza place with a full bar. Definitely not the kind of place you'd take someone for a romantic Valentine's Day dinner, but it was still busy because some people aren't very tactful. We had a guy who'd called ahead and asked if we could put a ring in a dessert for him, and of course we obliged. He dropped the ring off a day ahead, and I put it in the safe in our office to keep it secure. Fast forward to Valentine's Day, the couple shows up and they're so obviously in love that she didn't seem to notice or care about the fact that he had brought her to a middle-of-the-road place with a sports bar atmosphere on the most romantic day of the year. They ordered champagne, well, the local winery's best sparkling white, entrees, and it was almost time for dessert. I'd used my chef skills to whip up a special chocolate strawberry tart that wasn't on the menu just for this occasion, because why not try to make their night at least a little fancy? I went to the safe to get the ring and it wasn't there. I was freaking out big time. I asked everyone there if they knew what the frick had happened to it. My assistant manager on site had no idea, so I called my other assistant, who also had the safe code, and they didn't know either. Finally, my bar manager mentioned that one of the owners had been in earlier and spent a little time in the office. So, at my wit's end, I called the owner. It turns out that he'd seen the ring in the safe and thought it was something a customer had left behind. Figuring that he'd come into an extremely lucky situation, he decided, like the scumbag he was, that he'd take it for himself and save money on a gift for his wife on Valentine's. So I asked the server and bar manager to help stall the couple. The server told them that we were going to do something special for their big date and to hold tight. I ran out, hopped in my car, and rushed to get the ring from the owner's house, because he was, as I'd mentioned, a scumbag and didn't want to be bothered with bringing the ring to the restaurant himself. The bar manager went over to the table and did some complicated tableside cocktail mix that had a bunch of flair bartending tricks and ended with a flaming shot that, once dropped into the rest, made it smoke. I was really disappointed when I heard about all of this because I would have loved to see it instead of breaking a ton of traffic laws on my quest to get the one ring. Finally, I rushed back in after about 15 minutes of being on the brink of a heart attack, placed the ring on the dessert, and had their server take it out. At that point, just about the entire staff was watching the table, and when we saw the look on her face, my heart finally started beating again. She said yes, and I started looking for someone else to work for the very next day.
Operation Scumbag is a success. Eagle has landed.
This is the best Valentine's Day story I've ever read. It was so awesome of you to go to all that trouble to make their night special, and that boss was a scumbag. I would have told his wife if it was me. I was working for a certain high-end chain steakhouse in the northwest corner of Greater Los Angeles, in the Valley. Valentine's is obviously one of the top 5 busiest days of the year for us. We did about 500 covers between 5 and 10 p.m. It's also a restaurant with a very open concept floor plan. Booths along the 4 walls of the restaurant and an array of tables in the middle with no partitions or anything between them. A younger couple, maybe mid-20s, dressed to the nines, came in shortly after we opened and were seated in a table basically in dead center of the dining room. They were very friendly and pleasant, and I could tell that for them, dining in our restaurant was a really special treat, so I did everything in my power to make it special for them. When they were done, probably around 7, I brought their check, which was around $300. When I came back to pick it up, the guy had a super embarrassed look on his face, and he said he thinks he left his wallet in the car, and the woman, who was embarrassed for him, doesn't have anything with her because her dress had no pockets and she didn't bring a purse. So he goes out and 5 minutes later comes back in looking pale as a ghost. He has left his wallet at home and asks if he can call back later with payment info. My GM won't let this fly because there's no collateral of any sort he can leave, so the guy has to drive home to Burbank to get his wallet while the woman waits with her hair done and her red lipstick and her pretty dress in the middle of our dining room on Valentine's Day. Now, on the best day with no traffic, which never happens, it's at least 40 minutes each way from our restaurant to Burbank. She was there for almost 2 hours waiting for this guy. We were all so embarrassed for her that the staff kept discreetly slipping her drinks and little amuse-bouche bites from the kitchen. It was one of the most awkward things I've ever seen in a restaurant. When he finally got back, he was super apologetic to us and to her. He paid the check and tipped like 30% and they left. It was pretty obvious it was an honest mistake, but I still think about that couple from time to time, and I wonder how things worked out for them. I set my hair on fire and spilled a full Stella on a lady. I work in a casual fine dining steakhouse. Luckily for me, the lady I spilled the Stella on was super understanding, and her husband said across the table, "Well, now she has to take her pants off." So that could have gone worse for me.
Why did you set your hair on fire before spilling on a lady? Just to feel alive?
Candles are my enemy. I have belly button long hair. You might want to consider shaving it if you have so much belly button hair it's just a fire hazard. I was working as a waitress in a sushi restaurant, and on Valentine's Day it was an all-hands-on-deck shift. This guy I'd just started seeing wanted to go out, but I told him I was working in food service. You never get Valentine's Day off, and we just had to celebrate the day after or the weekend after. Nope. He got so upset that he went and asked a different girl out, came to the restaurant I worked at on V-Day, and sat in my section. He then proceeded to spend the entire evening making a fool out of himself and making his date uncomfortable as he tried to make me jealous. Needless to say, we didn't ever go out again. Ever. What's the grossest example of personal hygiene that you've ever seen or smelled? I used to work retail, and one day we had this woman come into the store who had not showered for months. She stunk the whole store up from just walking around. We had to ask her to leave due to hygiene. I'll never forget that stench. It was like low tide and a dead body had been sitting around for a month.
When I worked at a lingerie store, one of my first nights when I was still being supervised, a couple came in. The man was scraggly and a bit dirty looking, and the woman looked very clean. But there was a smell, a fishy smell, and my boss and I both assumed it was coming from the man. So we let the woman try on a couple of sets. Oh my god, we were wrong. We were so wrong. We had to air out the dressing room and steam clean the lingerie. It was awful.
I have a girlfriend who thought it was normal for guys to have dingleberries. Poor girl was going down on a guy with matted poop fur down there.
Okay, this one out of all of them made me audibly gasp. What the frick?
I had to Google dingleberries. Oh, what the frick?
I'm sitting in my living room by myself yelling out loud at this one.
I work in an ER in a low-income area. There was this one that I'll never forget. She was a mid-40s obese hoarder who had decided it wasn't worth the effort to get out of her recliner for 2 weeks straight. She had a fridge within reach, so she wasn't hungry, but was producing feces and urine the entire time without getting up to use the restroom or clean herself. You could smell her down the hall with the door closed, and her behind was literally rotting away with pressure sores down to her bones.
Oh, but how can you stand that?
Probably nerve damage, and she'd slowly desensitized herself to being in that situation by building up behavior. I believe in this case she had some severe depression as well, which definitely could have contributed. Once the pressure sores are through the full skin thickness, they're past the pain receptors. They stop hurting and further damage isn't noticed.
Someone once came into my ER that had been laying in their own spew, most pungent but definitely other bodily fluids for several days, and the stomach acid had eroded her skin. She was pulling off chunks of her scalp, then playing with the skin and hair, all in a substances-induced state. Stay away from substances, kids.
Well, I'm about 1/10 of the way through this script and I already want to burn it, all the stories, and the entire internet to the ground. Oh well, only the rest of the video to go. You're welcome, listeners. I worked at an engine assembly plant in New York State where everyone else is in these 3 to 5 station teams that rotate every hour, so you don't go crazy doing the same job for 8+ hours. We had this dude who came to our group who had the nastiest teeth I've ever seen in my life. His bottom front teeth were all fused together into one big lower tusk, and his breath could gag a maggot. It got so difficult to work with the guy, you could smell his breath from at least 6 feet away, that we had to go to a manager to figure out how to handle it and not be buttholes. Well, all they could do was tell him he needed to do something about it, so he constantly had a tub of mints on him. After that, his breath just smelled like a rotting corpse and mint. So, yay.
As someone who's been through this earlier in my life, I beg you to go easy on people who have the rotting smell on their breath, because there's no hiding it. It's their teeth you smell rotting. I spent most of my teenage years homeless and without insurance until I was 25. My teeth started falling apart when I was 14. Apparently, my adult teeth came in with very weak enamel, and I was always told I would take lots of visits to keep them in good health. By the time I had insurance, it was so bad that the $2,000 a year plans that everyone has would not cover anything resembling a helpful solution. Even just getting dentures and pulling the teeth was going to be $12,000 or up. I was embarrassed all the time. I spoke to no one unless I was 10+ feet away, never looked anyone in the eye, and never smiled even when I had a reason to. In the end, all my teeth needed replacing, but specifically, all of my molars had rotted down to below the gum line, and I learned to chew soft food with my tongue. So I get it, bad breath is bad, but try to see it from their point of view. Rotting teeth suck, and unless you have a plan without a yearly limit, which barely exists these days, it's hard to do anything about it. Mine was out of my control. I brushed and flossed daily, as I was supposed to, and they still fell apart. My first tooth crumbled while I was eating mac and cheese, which is not strong enough to break a tooth. I lived in a triple dorm when I was a sophomore in college, 2 friends and myself. When my friend transferred to a different school over Christmas break, the college automatically added in a 3rd person as our dorm had the only opening on campus. The girl was a year younger than us, not a huge deal, but the problem developed a few days after she moved in with us. There was a slight odor when she walked by. The odor grew day by day. We began to realize that she wasn't showering. We had an ensuite bathroom and we would hear the water turned on in the shower for about 5 minutes, but she never came out with wet hair or looking any different than when she went in.
We went for a soft approach at first. We went to Bath & Body Works and got her a really nice basket of scented soaps and shampoos and conditioners, because she only had one very odd generic shampoo that she had in the shower. She was very grateful and we thought that would be the end of it. She put the shower items in the shower and literally nothing else changed. The levels on the soaps and shampoo didn't go down. The smell was getting worse. We sat down with her and had a serious but concerned conversation. We said we were worried about her and wanted to know if she was okay and how we could help. She said everything was fine and nobody else had ever mentioned her smelling bad. I find that completely impossible, as she was surrounded by a stench of body odor coming from every pore. She said she'd shower more. She began going to parties, which we thought would make her clean up a bit, but it didn't. She would just add cheap alcohol to the body odor scent. After about a month, my roommate and I went to the dorm advisor and explained what the situation was and how we were done. She was smelling worse every day and was beginning to be very snotty to us. The residence director met with her, and although he couldn't tell us what happened during the meeting, he verified that he could smell the odor coming off her. Thankfully, she had made a friend, a very odd duck, but a duck I'm still thankful for, and that friend's roommate moved out. She moved within a week. We ran into her on campus every now and then. Same stink. I had a friend with very low self-esteem, could never find a girlfriend, self-pity kind of guy. He had the worst grime and film on his teeth. I told him he won't find a girlfriend unless he cleans his teeth because it's repulsive to anyone with any respect for themselves, in less words. He denied it, saying someone will like him for him, blah blah blah. Well, one day his grandma paid for him to see a dentist who made them pearly whites once again. Not 2 weeks later, he had himself a girlfriend. Still thinks it was never the problem. Woman was a heavy smoker, which can cause a lot of issues in itself, and bad BO like she never showered, and the list goes on and on. But the worst thing was this nasty brown blouse that she wore all the time, and I mean like 4 days a week at least. But she did wear other things occasionally because they always jumped out. Thing is, there was a picture on her desk wearing that blouse from like 5 or 6, whatever years before, and it was white in the picture. I just thought it was coincidence, and no way it was the same one, till one of her co-workers who shared the office with her started complaining about her one day when she was gone, and the woman confirmed it was the same shirt and she had slowly watched it change from white to whatever disgusting color it currently was over the years. My granddad did quit eventually, but my nan smoked until she died. Anyway, I'm there with my mom and aunt cleaning the house, and they always had this yellow/green wallpaper. Start taking family pictures off the walls, and suddenly this lovely baby blue wallpaper is staring right at us. A guy we call the Stink Beast. I was a rent-to-own delivery guy right out of college. We had a regular customer that smelled like a sock stuffed with boiled cabbage and soaked in diarrhea, all the time. He also only wore tank tops. I went to his nasty house to pick up a stereo he couldn't pay for. I spent 20 minutes in his house unhooking wires, etc. There was dog crap on the couch next to me in more than one spot. And I mean actual turds, not a smear or something. I rolled the stereo out on a dolly through several more piles of crap and loaded the stereo into the van. As I'm ready to close the door, he runs out with a wad of cash and wants me to put it back. While I'm writing up a new ticket, he leans in to adjust something on the stereo. His sweaty, hairy pit jams right into my face. It was like getting hit in the face with a used diaper. I immediately whirl around and spew in his yard. While I'm trying to be nice and pretending to get the flu, his dog proceeds to come over and eat said spew. So yeah, this guy. Bonus to the story, 2 years or so after this happened, I saw the Stink Beast at an old country buffet. I told my wife that he was there, and her reply was that he must be the guy in the blue tank top. She said she could smell him from the opposite side of the steam table. Said people were sniffing the steamer like something had spoiled. I had a part-time job at uni cleaning out student rooms after the occupants had moved out. One room was left with no fewer than 28 bottles of urine that the occupant had decided to just leave in the room. The shared bathroom was next door. Yep, as someone who lived in student accommodation, I'm just surprised it took this long for the first example from that kind of dorm to show up. And an abundance of pee bottle stories follows. My buddy supervises commercial building construction. He constantly has to reprimand and discourage the workers from peeing in bottles, then sealing them in the walls. All because they're too lazy to walk to the porta potty and too lazy to throw the bottles away. I'm currently imagining future archaeologists quizzing each other over the meaning of why our civilization sealed urine into walls. I peed in a lemonade container in middle school so I could get some weird middle school clout. But without a plan, I panicked and stuffed it in my locker. I was so paranoid about taking it out and getting caught that I just left it in there, and since it was a little buried under unused binders, I pretty much forgot about it until cleaning my locker for the end of the year. Middle school was too strange of a time for me. This guy and his family didn't like to shower, and they all had food stains all over their clothing, but the father smelled like he pooped himself, smelled like pee, and that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was he had food stuck in his hair and maggots crawling in it. Literally, the guy smelled like death. He said I was being offensive because I stood 10 feet away from him. Guy had the nerve to call my manager over, who then immediately stuck his hand up and said he wasn't interested in hearing his story, that he needed to leave and not come back until he took a shower. After this is when he started taking care of himself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I met a girl on a dating app and we got along well online, but she smelled like crap in person. I'm talking fully clothed and several feet away, there was still this stench of poop. I was really embarrassed for her, to be honest. She complained about guys ghosting her and not knowing why. I mean, it's not easy to tell someone they smell like butt. I don't know how you couldn't be aware of it either. Nose blindness is a thing. You stop smelling the things you're used to. I remember a story about how Febreze, which eliminated odors, was having trouble getting going. Some people from the company were interviewing regular people about their habits, and they came across an old cat lady whose house absolutely reeked. When they subtly and politely asked about cat smell, the lady replied that it was amazing that with so many cats around, they didn't smell at all, and that's why she didn't need to use Febreze. This is also why smokers think other people can't tell they're smokers. We can, and why some women who have a favorite perfume end up drenching themselves in it over time as they stop being able to smell the regular dose. I worked on a dairy farm growing up in Wisconsin. If you don't already know, dairy farms smell terrible. I would always smell the farm at first when I showed up to work, and after a while you no longer smell it. The kids in high school made fun of how I smelled even though I wore clean clothes and took showers every night when I came home from work. Fast forward to me coming home for the first time in a year after joining the army, I'm going through some old clothes and wow, the stench on those things, even though they were washed, was quite strong. I threw them out. So yeah, nose blindness is definitely a thing. So I used to work at this really upscale vegan hot pot restaurant a few years ago. The owner-operator was very adamant on how it's okay not to wash your hands because in my country, washing hands meant you're cleaning off the hard work you've done. She was the only one who wouldn't, even after using the bathroom. We knew she wouldn't wash her hands. She'd use gloves, yes, since she handled food sometimes, but even then, still wash your fricking hands. Also, my ex told me he didn't think it was necessary to wash his pee-pee because my wang just washes itself when the shampoo runs down my body in the shower. People say that about their feet too. Wash your damn feet. You do not want nasty feet. Especially if you're diabetic. You get nasty feet, you get ulcers, you get an infection, now you have no feet to wash. I'm a nurse, so I've seen some crap, but the worst would be a woman with scabies and fleas. I don't know how she got them, but she was so ashamed of having them that she basically just barricaded herself at home for some weeks until her daughter got her admitted to the hospital. I'm not exaggerating when I say that everything on her jumped when you came close to her bed or she moved. She had them everywhere, and I mean everywhere. I spare you the description of her intimate area. Ugh, my aunt is a nurse and she had some stories. One that stuck out was a large obese woman who came in and they had to bathe her. My aunt said she lifted up her bosom only to be greeted by live maggots. Oh, I'm going away now. Goodbye. I dated a hippie. Now, he showered every day, but he never used soap or shampoo because of chemicals. We did the deed a couple of times, and yeah, he was a bit whiffy, but nothing too grotesque. I'm into perfumery, so also have a thing for the smells of humans. I was cool with it. One day, he wanted me to rim him. My mind immediately went to the fact that he never used soap, so his butthole was probably in, well, pretty crappy shape. I sensually suggested we take our adult fun times to the shower. I seductively got in the shower and made a big deal of soaping him up from top to bottom, finishing on his butthole. The water ran brown. It ran brown from years of built-up crap. I watched as the densely, poopy, soapy water went down the drain and realized I could do better in life. Or at least stop dating hippies. I work in medical, so I've seen a lot, but one of my good friends who is a high-level marketing person at a university and has a master's degree asked me how often I clean my house. I found out she showers once every 10 days, has numerous skin infections, wipes off kitchen counters maybe once a month once things get moldy, etc. But the worst part was when she told me she never changes or washes her sheets. She had them on her bed for 2 years and never took them off until she threw them away because she bought new ones.
And I feel bad when I don't change my sheets after 1 week.
After a night at the bar, I went home with this cute guy who outwardly seemed pretty normal and attractive. Got to his place and it was filled with garbage, like a layer of garbage spread on the floor. I had a few drinks in me, so it was like, okay, he's cute, this is gross, but let's see how it goes. Takes me to his bedroom and there's literally disgusting old food and garbage in the bed and in the sheets. Like not just containers, expired, disgusting, open food directly on the bed, and lots of it. It was so revolting, I started thinking of excuses to leave. This guy was cute though, so I stuck around another 5 to 10 minutes thinking how we can work this out. We sat on the bed and literally under the sheets were filled with garbage too. He proceeds to take off his socks for whatever reason and his toenails are completely black, with long nails, and his feet are so dirty like they hadn't been washed ever. I gagged a little before bolting out of there saying I didn't feel well, which I didn't. Honestly, I was young and willing to put up with a lot, but that was a no-go. Oh my god, a lot of my girl pals have told me a lesser version of this same story, and I'd say went home with a cute guy only to find out he's a filth wizard man-child is pretty common, but not to this extent. Unrelated, this script has been very challenging to record without gagging. If you've listened this far, I salute you. Please let me know if you've made it up to here. I have one and only one instance of insane hygiene. When I was in college, they got some dorm assignments screwed up. I played baseball and thus I was in the athletic dorm. For some reason, rather than assigning another ball player to my room, they assigned some random guy. This initially was no problem for me. I was not a stereotypical jock, and I had many friends who weren't athletes. The first day was okay. Turned out he worked at Domino's Pizza and would bring home 4 or 5 pizzas after work. So he shows up with some pizza and says I can have all I want. I'm thinking this might be cool, free pizza every day. Alas, things quickly took a turn. The first and second nights I noticed just a hint of that dirty feet smell. Dude didn't take his shoes off either night, so I was like, where is this coming from? But really, it wasn't that noticeable, just the occasional whiff as I said. The third night, oh my god, I walk in from baseball practice late, and he was already there playing his Xbox. He had the latest versions of PlayStation and Xbox and tons of games. I mention this so that it's clear that poverty is not to blame for the situation. Anyway, I walked into the room and I smelled a smell that I have never smelled before or since. A smell beyond description. He had simply taken off his shoes and his socks were black. They were supposed to be white. God knows the last time he had changed them, I stepped back outside to keep from gagging. For the next month, until they straightened out the dorm situation, I was only in my room for sleep. Nothing else. The only way I could sleep was to spray my pillow with cologne or something and bury my face in it. The smell hung in the air after that, even when he wasn't there. When my friends would come by to get me to go out, they would walk in and immediately turn and leave and give me a what the frick look. During my month living with my new friend, who to my knowledge never actually attended a class, I never saw him shower. I saw him in 2 sets of clothing during that month, his pizza uniform and a t-shirt and gym shorts ensemble completed by his spoiled socks. After he was relocated, I never saw him again, and I prayed that whoever was his new roommate was born without a sense of smell. We had 2 regulars that used to come into our bar. They were in their later years of life but enjoyed the atmosphere and loved chatting up anyone who would listen. Things started going south a few years back when we started getting some complaints that they would sometimes smell like urine. Then it dawned on me. I hadn't seen either of them get up and go to a washroom. Eventually, we came to find out that instead of acting like normal members of society, they would come in, drink a beer for a few hours and just casually pee themselves while wearing diapers and not think anyone would notice.
They could have been incontinent from years of holding it in while they sat and drank. My mom's ex had a buddy who ended up like that because he felt like taking a pee killed his buzz. Started wearing adult diapers at like 42 or 43, he said. The only reason I know this is because we were on a road trip and he made a point of stopping to let me take a leak and explaining why I shouldn't hold it in for any reason. I went to a friend's house and she picked up poop from her cat's litter box with her hand and then proceeded to not wash her hands. Wait, stop! What the frick? This might be the most casually messed up one here, in my opinion.
My wife was a labor and delivery nurse and she told me one time a woman was having a baby and the doctor asked the woman if she wanted that mole looked at, then poked at it with a set of hemostats. The mole moved and it was actually a cluster of crabs that the woman had on her downstairs parts. My wife was horrified, so she told me. Ugh. I had a landlord who reeked of garlic. You could smell him from a mile away. It would take the whole day to get the smell out of the apartment after he left. He was from Transylvania, so I always joked that he fled the vampires and applied garlic every day just to be safe. My grandma gave me a garlic pill to fend off the mosquitoes. It fended off everyone else too. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.